how would I run a Star Trek campaign? So my I so how would I run a Star Trek campaign? I really enjoy the aspect of D&D that starts at the bottom and works up to something. I think that's very narratively satisfying for characters. It's satisfying. I think the gameplay, it's fun to see that evolve and the characters. So I always start my campaigns at level 1. Um, I'll jump fairly aggressively early on, but I like to still start. Experience points can be fun to track in a bookkeeping sort of way, but I like when groups level up after some big in-game achievement. So I start players at level 1 in solo prologue sessions. After that first session, they're level 2. Once the group is playing together, I try to find milestones roughly after the same number of sessions as the level up. So 3 more sessions, they're level 3. 4 more, level 4, and so on. And so when I think of Star Trek, what is the Star Trek equivalent to that? And it's like, geez, I don't know. Maybe it's is it a disgraced or an abandoned crew? Maybe it's there was a mutiny on board, and the players basically are abandoned in a town far out at the edge of like the known, like definitely outside of like Enterprise reach and coverage or whatever. They're basically isolated. They've lost their ship, and they kind of have to start from scratch, and maybe even start on a ship that's not theirs. Maybe their best in is to actually sort of be criminals or bounty hunters, or at least to pretend to be, so that they can at least get access to a ship to get the heck out of that system. Maybe it's only level 4 or 5 where they actually get a chance to speak back to get. I'm using a lot of the wrong words because I'm not steeped in like Star Trek stuff, but to be able to get in touch with anybody official and sort of try to regain their standing. So would they be the bridge crew? I mean, I would have to figure some of that stuff out. I'm not super well versed. Like, I think I just said Enterprise rather than like the Federation. If I was to run something like that and I wanted it to fit, I would have to start by watching a lot, basically all of the Star Trek. I'd have to do that. Unless I did that, I wouldn't feel like I would have the right context for running in that world. It's part of the reason I'm a lot more comfortable running in my custom worlds, because I know 100% of the things that are true there. Oh, sure. Like it would be, I mean, isn't it a lot more exciting if, what's the adventure that could be had, and how could a crew that has no right being the crew, how could they earn their stripes, so to speak? Ooh, maybe it's even like that even gives you the opportunity for one of the people that joins them, or purports to be from the ship, one of the players. You could have like an arrangement with them, and they're actually a pirate, but they get kind of taken by the group, and they decide, actually, at the end of the day, I'm going to impersonate. So then you have a fun twist at the end of like, okay, we're back to the Federation. They're getting everybody on board. They're like, who good? And then they're like, wait, who's that? And they're like, what do you mean? They were in, I think they said, engineering. They were like, we don't know who that is. That person's never been on a ship that that we're responsible for. And then it's like, do they throw them off, or do they treat them like one of their own? Do they trust them? Like that could be kind of fun. Yeah, red shirts. I at least have that level of like cultural Star Trek awareness. I just would. There would be too many things that I could screw up, and too many opportunities I would miss by not sort of becoming, just deciding to sort of become a nerd of that fandom. Like that's what I would do if I was going to make, something in that world. It would feel weird otherwise. What is a good amount of big, medium, and small islands in a world? Are you talking about like on a world map for like new players to consider going to? I'm not sure it matters, Reese. Like I wouldn't, like, in terms of islands specifically. Let's change it to like, if you think about options. So when I think about new players in a campaign setting, for the first session or two, I give them the fewest number of options. Like usually in a campaign, in the first session together, there's going to be a clear and present danger, something that requires them sort of leaping to action. And the goal of it is to have sort of a fun, self-contained dungeon or adventure that is going to basically get them working together, having fun, accomplishing something, and picking up leads for what's next. After that first adventure, which could take 1 or 2 or 3 sessions, it just depends on the campaign, then I'm going to open them up to usually no more than like a couple of choices. It's probably only until like it's not until like, and when I say a couple of choices, I mean it now that that's done, there will be a couple of requests on the backside of that adventure of people in town who are like, hey, we're traveling out, we're going to be, we're going on a lumber haul, but the woods have been kind of spooky lately. Could you chaperone us? And somebody else is going to say, hey, to the south, we've been hearing stories about some orcs moving in. You guys should go help them out. I heard it's paying quite a bit. Just a couple of options that are going to generally point in different directions. I don't usually even provide a functional world map right away. Like even if I do, it's just for like context and like awareness of where they are in the world, but I'm not going to reference more than the town and the nearby roads until they get probably to like 4th or 5th level at least. And basically after each level up, the options before them are going to balloon. Now these aren't the options for solving things. This is just like where to go. And yeah, eventually, and I say eventually, like probably usually by 5th or 6th level, they have sort of like access to a whole lot more. Like the job boards are going to have a lot of places listed. Like there might be 6 or 7 or 8, depending on how many sort of big ideas that I have. Plus they're going to have their own initiatives that they're going after and things that they want to track down, so it kind of depends. Like if they're beginner players, I would usually lean towards giving them fewer options, not because I don't want them to have options, but because it could inadvertently generate sort of like a paralysis of decision making, where they're not exactly sure what's best. That's why I say early on, I like when the choices start to show up, it's here's a noble goal, helping this family out to the north, and to the south, here's a job that'll pay, but maybe doesn't have any other acolytes except for that. Like, they're sort of deciding, and you're sort of learning about them. Like, is it money that they're after, or is it like building up rapport in the town and helping, like, a family with their local wares? And then once you find out which one their preference is, you can really turn the screws on that one. No, I mean, kind of, but that also makes sense. Your first campaign was at a big C. Yeah. And that's fine. But the question is, how many sort of like interactable things are seated on that map? Maybe it's a big map with a lot of places on it, but in actuality, there's only a couple of places that they've heard something about that they could travel to. And I say could travel to, like, obviously they could just go, we want to just like sail north. And it's like, okay, this will be a fun game, right? But typically parties are pretty good in my experience about, they're looking for what are the things with which the game sort of is encouraging us to interact, especially early on. People want to have fun stuff to do. What are their options? What are the things they can tackle, I guess. Face Ryan, me and the gang are evil maxing and getting all nefarious with your silly shenanigans as devious little stinkers. Any advice for running an evil campaign? We're still brainstorming story arcs. So I'll preface this by saying I don't have any experience doing this. Well, I have a little bit of experience doing this. What I might recommend, I don't know if I'd recommend it. Here's what interests me about like evil maxing stuff, and this might be something to consider. First and foremost, I would still establish sort of team rules, right? I personally find it really tedious when there's a lot of like backstabbing amongst a group. I like to keep that to a minimum. Sometimes it happens. It's not the end of the world, but I just don't want it to be like a main facet of the game. uh, because the game really isn't designed for that. At least the version, D&D is just not really great for player versus player stuff. Beyond that, the only time that I've run anything close to kind of an evil character campaign, there was a character in the guild game that I ran. In short, the party was trying to light these protective flames. They thought that would basically protect the world. That was what their guild did. But there was an antagonist out there who was basically destroying these shrines, putting out these flames, and causing all sorts of trouble. And that was sort of like an early game villain for them. And I had another player playing that early game villain and basically deciding what they would do, actually playing out some stuff in different cases. But I basically gave the role of the villain to another player. But when I did that, the archetype that the way that we sort of designed it was, instead of there's a common idea of like an anti-hero, right? Somebody who reluctantly is the hero. Something like Han Solo is an anti-hero, right? He's not trying to be a hero, but I guess he kind of has to be, right? And these are really it's a popular character type. I thought a lot about the idea of an anti-villain when sort of crafting that situation and working with that player on that sort of villainous arc. Because again, it's not so much that they want to be a villain, but they're willing to accept that role. They're willing to accept being villainous because what they think they're accomplishing is worth it. And I was able to find like a clear vision for all of that to work without somebody being like a mustache twirling sort of cartoon character villain. I was like, how do we need to find who this character is and what they're motivated by. Okay, they're willing to take up the mantle. They're willing to sort of be hated to accomplish the ends. They'd rather not be hated, but if that's what it takes to get this done, they'll do it. And I found that to be a really interesting way to do it. Maybe something like that, or a dose of that, could be a part of a villainous group, a villainous campaign. I don't know. But I know that if it ever comes around that I'm running something like that, that's probably what I would, try to implement. Well, and it's a really tricky thing too, because it's really complicated to run kind of groups against one another without them knowing that they're groups. You sort of have to create a lot of boundaries and a lot of buffer and make sure that you got to make sure that the game can still happen. But I think the best villains are typically villains that are sort of like not begrudgingly villains, but they have a goal that puts them at odds with the world. It's not that they're just mustache twirling villains, So, yeah. So you're aiming for a one shot, but sounds like interested in a campaign, huh? Don't worry about the rules; those will come in time. Any tips for prepping for a first campaign? So I think that in my opinion, the best way to prep a campaign is to start with sort of what's the big idea, what's the central conflict that's going to drive things. Is there a dragon that is terrorizing the whole world, or maybe a series of them? Is there a lich? Is it political corruption? That may be a little bit too close to home instead of fantasy nowadays. So maybe it's like so let's assume it's like a lich, right? There's an evil wizard, an evil undead wizard. That's a pretty good standby. What you don't want to do, and this may sound counter to what I just suggested starting with, what you don't want to do is spend a lot of time planning things beyond session 1, which sounds counterintuitive, right? It's like, why are we starting with the big bad if we're focused on the first session? Well, we don't want to spend too much time on the big bad. We want to know who they are. We're going to set them out on the horizon. That's the big idea. But we're going to take that big bad and start to think about, like, broadly speaking, what are the ramifications? What happens as a result of that being a threat? if the evil wizard is out there in a tower somewhere, how is the world impacted? And we're going to stair step that threat down until it's like level 1 party problem. So let's assume that, maybe um the evil wizard is like the brother to the king, which is why he's allowed to do the things that he does without the royal guard coming after him. Okay, well, that would maybe that would cause all sorts of sort of brewing tensions and plots against the king that would affect like the guilds and affect the basically whatever the factions are within the world, and those tensions would all the way down at the I'm skipping a few rungs, but all the way down at the parties level. Maybe that comes down to a couple of merchants who work for opposing guilds getting into a fist fight and the party getting involved to sort of you know um, calm things in the market square, right? Maybe one of the guys is has like some potion of summoning and uses it to attack the other, and there's chaos and the party gets involved, and that's like in that first session. It technically has nothing to do with the lich evil big bad horrible wizard guy, but there are kernels of what that's going to be already, and then you can sort of let that unfold into the rest of the world, such that it's like, wow, I can't believe that we're going after a lich when we just started, basically settling a bar room brawl in the first session. So that first session is everything. I would, if what I just described is like, spend definitely 75 to 90% of your time on that first session, but reserve 10% to sort of just like sketch and outline, like, here's the big threat, here's why they're a big threat, here's how it affects everything, because that gives you something to kind of always be pointing things to, right? Why are these guys fighting? And then one of them says like, well, his guild's trying to drive mine out, or like they've been doing this horrible stuff, and then you can allow that kind of stuff to continue to develop over the course of the campaign. That's kind of how I approach planning, and it makes that core threat and what that core threat is really important, because you have to care enough about it and be excited enough about it that you want to think about it and the ramifications of that threat for an entire campaign. So my first successful campaign that's still going today, the big bad is basically a mortal who's trying to become a god again. So think of it like kind of like a twisted Indiana Jones. He's basically finding his old artifacts. Like, he's basically like a fallen old god trying to get back to that earlier status. So everything, sort of the ripple effects of his horrible actions, his desperate actions to become a god again, that's what has sort of turned everything upside down for that campaign. The second campaign that I did, which is also still ongoing right now, was a lich who basically rose to power because he made a deal with an impending evil force to basically keep them at bay, and therefore has been a lich in hiding for many, many years, and then the party joins his guild, not realizing he's evil. That's kind of the big picture there, but I think the big picture is important. But I think really, I'm not a big fan of crazy amounts of world building, except for where it impacts what that actual playtime is going to look like. Silas, pretty much everything is XPS. I don't think I have anything. I don't really work substantially in anything else. Like, if you see a door, it's probably XPS. Yeah. True construct. Yeah. Bullet points. Yep. I definitely used to write out everything that I thought an NPC might say, just because I was like, I don't know what I need to prep. And there's really no trick to that. You just need experience to know what it is you need. Notes wise, we'll do a campaign prep at some point, like actually take some ideas and kind of go all the way through. Like, here's what I would do to plan the campaign, and here's what I would do to plan the first session or two, and probably some prologues and stuff like that. We'll set up a whole sample campaign. Yeah, we'll do that at some point. You say the vocabulary is a fun one. Oh, am I using a lot? Sorry, I try not to use too many words that are, I guess, what's the word for them? Too many. It's not like protected words, but like words that need to be defined, like self-defining. Yeah, jargon. Thank you, Construct. Why can't I think of the word that is specifically the word that's? Yeah, there's irony in that I couldn't think of that. Billy, wonderful question. It kind of depends. Some people will use adventure and campaign interchangeably. When I say usually 10 to 20 sessions in a campaign, you know, I would say probably the average is probably like 20 sessions. That's probably average. That'd be my guess. Let's put a range. Let's say an average of 10 to 40 sessions. I don't know. Ryan is super unusual because I run really long campaigns that are 100 plus sessions easy. And you can imagine part of the reason it's difficult to answer is because if you run 10 to 40 sessions, especially on the lighter end of that, that might just be an adventure. That might be. I was checking. I don't have a 5e book on hand, but that might be just running a campaign. Might be running a book, right? Part of the beautiful thing about this game is that I think every table is sort of playing its own iteration of this. I don't think there are hard and set definitions around this stuff. I think it's every group and every dynamic is going to be its own. I'll tell you the way I think about it. I think about and I organize. Let me see if I can even bring up. Okay, so here's a campaign. And I'll break down a campaign you can see here into kind of these chapter sections. And then within those chapters, like you can see, 100 plus. We're in chapter 8, I think technically chapter 8. This is one of my campaigns and sort of how I have broken it down over time. I don't necessarily like reveal this sort of thing to my players. For the most part, this is just how I organize my notes, usually like mostly after the fact. And there'll be some notes here and there. Like I do prologue sessions, I do side shots, or one shot sort of baked into the campaign at different points. And I just sort of bucket things where I feel like it makes sense. If they're in a town for a while, that all gets kind of grouped together. Right now they're in sort of the end game, sort of the prelude to sort of facing down the final big bad boss. But this is not, you shouldn't take any of what I'm showing as like, well, this is the only way to do it. It's not that at all. It's just everybody finds their own process, their own way. I think campaign is sort of a broken word. You can see how difficult it is to even try to describe what it is. But an adventure, think of it like that. When you're looking at anything like that that's been made, think of it as an adventure. You're looking at a beginning, middle, and an end. You're looking at a hopefully narratively complete experience. I would think of them as adventures. I call them arcs because I find that more useful. Maybe the entire epic adventure of a game that I run for years is sort of the adventure, and then individual arcs within it are sort of more tied together. Another term you'll hear a lot is a one shot. Yeah. A one shot is basically the smallest version of all of this. And it usually plays different than a longer term game will, right? A one shot is probably going to be one shots are going to include pre-made characters, very specific starting and ending points, can be less high stakes compared to long-term games. One of the most annoying things to watch happen, I guess I've been pretty lucky. It doesn't happen very often to me when I'm running, but I've been in one shots before where I'm a player and I've watched other players just do the worst job of playing along with a one shot. In a setting of a one shot, you really want to aggressively lean into the premise the DM provides. I've seen players be like, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to travel north." Right? That's always my example of the annoying player request when it's like, "This is where all the cool shit is." And they're like, "Yeah, but what about up there?" And it's like, "Why would you want to go up there? Look at all of this cool shit for you to play with. Here's the sandbox. Here's the place where things are." It's one thing to do that in a longer term game, and I think you can mitigate that, and it doesn't have to be the end of the world. You can find a way to work with those players. In a one shot, I have, and I think DM should have exactly 0% like tolerance for that. Just go like, nope, that's not like, because it's like a social faux pas, right? Like anytime you spend entertaining redirects from the core experience in a one shot is just wasted. Like a one shot, you're burning minutes, in my opinion. Like every minute spent has to be progressing the game, otherwise you're lost. Anyway, hopefully that helps a little bit. And I just saw your note there, Raven. An adventure is a book. Campaign is a series. Noelle and arc can be a bunch of chapters. Yeah, all of these things are, it's groupings of things. I think everybody has a slightly different version, which is cool. That's a good thing. Billy, when making campaign arcs or adventures, do you usually like to string together long continuous plot or kind of have different ideas for each arc, maybe subplots or optional tasks? So when I'm building out an arc, it's usually built around, it's hung on top of some interesting premise. And for me, that can be a lot of different things. My inspiration coming to D&D is not as somebody who is obsessed necessarily with Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or other sort of fantasy type stuff. I like all of that just fine. I read it all when I was a kid and older, and I like it all. But my source of inspiration is, I guess, more adventure-ish and even a little bit more sci-fi-ish in some ways, if that's what you'd call, whatever you'd call like Twilight Zone, whatever you'd call, Goosebumps or Choose Your Own Adventure books. I love time travel stories like Back to the Future. I like Indiana Jones. I like, these ideas of dungeons and trials and all of those things. So when I think about what is an arc, I hang it on, some people would call it like a gimmick. So if it's the in my world, the dungeon, or not the dungeon, the dwarven city of Hillbottom that is built itself on the backs of all of these talented dwarven inventors. That arc is it's political intrigue. There's somebody who is basically offing these inventors and seemingly creating some political upheaval, and it's up to the party to sort of puzzle out which of these remaining inventors is the culprit, because it certainly seems like somebody's creating constructs and attacking everybody else with them. Like, to me, that's an arc, right? It's not a single session. It's certainly a set of episodes, and it's sort of this like mystery investigation thing. Or right now, my party is trying to save the bard, the party bard's fiance from a vampire. So that session or that arc is all about this like cursed island that is basically presided over by this vampire. Literally, like a storm of souls surrounds it. You have to basically sacrifice your soul to get to the shores of the island, but they're all doing it to go save the bard's fiance up in the vampire's tower or whatever. So that this whole thing, that's an arc, right? So it breaks down in different ways. When I'm planning a campaign, I look at those arcs as I try to size them appropriately. So I use milestone leveling, which there are different ways to level people up. I don't use point systems. I level them up as they play through and kind of complete arcs. And I sort of scale the arcs based on the leveling. So let's say the whole party is level 3. To get to level 4, to level up your character to 4th level, I'm going to probably expect you're going to play about 4 sessions before that happens. So 4 sessions at level 3, that takes you to level 4. When you're at level 4, 5 sessions at level 4 takes you to level 5. That's generally broadly how I sort of outline these ideas. And so depending on what the party chooses to do, by the time they get to like level 5, level 6, they're probably picking, broadly speaking, like we're going after these huge ideas, right? North, south, east, west. Like they've picked up their own breadcrumbs at this point. They're following a trail to something. So when I'm looking at from level 5 to level 6, let's say, and that's a 6-session thing, I'm kind of trying to decide, okay, is this probably is going to be like 2 arcs that are each like 3 sessions each, maybe 2 small adventures, or something that's 6 long. I don't spend a ton of time thinking about that because when I'm running the campaign, it's hard to describe. It's almost more of a natural feeling where it's like, okay, the first session of the game is probably them chasing down some goblins or kobolds, or going through a weird murky dungeon with ooze and avoiding pitfalls and traps, and that's that first session or 2 sessions if it takes them a little bit longer. So then I know that the next one is like, okay, this time they're going to have to like chase down some bandits and maybe deal with a hostage scenario. That's a little bit more complicated. Okay, what would be a little bit more complicated than that? Like it, going kind of arc by arc through a campaign, it sort of just becomes, I think it's sort of just like a gut feeling about like what's a little bit more complicated. Early on, a party may just be chaperoning some loggers out into the woods and stumbling upon a wizard acolyte who mistakenly spawns a fire elemental in the forest, and they've got to save not only the people that are paying them for protection, but also the forest, right? And then they meet this character, and all these things happen. And that may be a simple little excursion early on in the campaign. And then level 8, level 9, level 10, somewhere in there, a witch's coven has taken over an entire town, and they have to basically dismantle it witch by witch, right? So as they level up, I think these things get more complicated, almost naturally. Like you kind of crave like, okay, here's the next thing. But it's hard to like break it down into a formula beyond that. I think that, and you also have to sort of, I mean, the table's guiding it. The table will take the game to these different places. And I think that my job as a dungeon master is to make sure when they go to some place, a town, a plane, wherever they travel to, that there's some kind of interesting gimmick or concept or thing to explore there that is worth the time. I nothing feels worse to me as a DM than having a place that's just, it's just a town with some basic, you have a shop. It's like I need there to be something interesting and unique about it to justify its existence, to make it worthwhile to be there. Otherwise, I'll summarize that they visit there and they keep on moving on, and we'll just kind of add that to the travel log. But yeah, Jerry, you did a Valentine's one shot. That's cool. I always like the idea of doing special one shots like that, but I always think of it too late. I need to plan it more in advance. You have a question. Okay. Right now you're fixing to be in 2 campaigns. Is there a limit to how many you should be in at once? I think the only limit that there should be is whatever limit you set for yourself. And my recommendation around that limit that you set for yourself would be probably at the point where any of the games that you're in, that your involvement in them suffers. So I don't have as much experience with this on the player side of it, but on the DM side, I started with 1 campaign and then I started a second campaign. So I run 2 weekly campaigns. And at one point for a while there, I was running actually 3 a week. I think the third one was every other week. It was like a unique opportunity with like 2 players, and I kind of wanted to experiment with tracking experience points, and it was like a city-based game. There's just a lot of interesting things that I wanted to try. Plus, I wanted to see if I could actually support 3 games a week. And I could. It was a bit of a strain sometimes, but I got a lot of good experience from doing that, and I like doing that. That's probably my limit. Now, my limit now that I'm like streaming and making videos, and because I didn't used to do all this stuff, I was just sort of making stuff and running games on my own, just hanging out down here with the cats and crafting to all hours of the morning. Now I do it all with sort of a community and all the stuff that keeps me plenty busy. So I think two a week is probably my limit now. But I think what I use as a gauge is, okay, at what point is the game suffering because I don't have enough time to put into it, or am I not putting enough energy and thought into it that I'm happy with kind of what happens in the game or my contributions to the game. I think there's probably more room as a player because technically you have less to think about, but that also has to do with like how much you can keep in your head, how much you can be excited about and be genuine about. Note taking probably plays a big part of it too. Yeah, 2's probably good. I would agree. Firemaster was my favorite D&D show or podcast. I don't really watch like actual plays or even listen to people talk about the game. Just kind of do my own thing. So I wouldn't have one to recommend. There are videos that I would that I like, individual videos I've liked. Like I cite I really like the Red Nose Day game between Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer ran a game for Stephen Colbert. I cite that, I think, all the time. That one's really cool. It's on YouTube. It's like an hour, but that was one of those things that I watched early on. It's a really solid like solo game. Before I got into the party I'm in, I tried to play D&D solo, but couldn't find a way. Do you one day want to try again? I'm thinking of making cards. Nice. Well, this was so I've never tried it actually solo. This was I guess it'd be better to call it a duet. So just like a DM DM plus one player. Ooh, that'd be really cool. A lore book would be fun. Would you I think if I was doing something like that, I'd want to like have it written for like I would create a character that wrote it. That way it could be written from the perspective of a character in the world rather than like, so it's almost like putting a history or like a cultural book into your world, but written by somebody who lives in it. That would be pretty neat. Shreen's, what do I think about plot exhaustion? Do you intentionally give moments of ease and levity to balance out everything feeling relevant and therefore important? Some downtime for characters. Yeah, I think that if we're not careful, so in a sense, like, there are pillars of the game and everybody kind of emphasizes usually one or two more than the others. I sort of think of it as like combat is definitely a big part of the game. Exploration / like investigation in my game is a big part of the game. And then role playing and sort of character specific work is another. Role playing, broadly speaking, social interactions, things like that. And to some extent, the game, I think, has survived by pivoting from one to the other and back and forth. Like you do combat, and then the next time can mean the next half of the session, or it can mean next session. And then there's a little bit more on the roleplay side, and then there's maybe some investigation, back to roleplay, back to combat. Maybe there's a little bit of each in every session, but I think that there's another thing you're talking about, which is ease and levity. I think that if we're not careful, one of the reasons that I like milestone leveling is that it kind of takes the foot off the gas a little bit. So I will institute, like I will determine for at least a while in my games, and every once in a while I'll still throw one in there. If the party finishes an arc, finishes a dungeon, I will then say, after that, you guys basically recuperated for about a week back in town. And then we talk about what that downtime may have looked like. if you don't, I've found that if I don't do that, first of all, the party is making haste all the time because, they're sitting at a table and imagining the adventure and like let's not waste time, let's not let the evil get ahead of us, blah blah blah, like everything is go 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 go. But it's always been really rewarding to actually bake that time in. Like we're in control of time as DMs. We can slow it down and focus on 6 seconds at a time in combat, or we can sort of zoom through it. And I think that kind of forcing players to say like, okay, after that adventure, as you recoup in town, you have a week. Sometimes I've made it 2 or 3 weeks because I'm like, that was a lot, and you guys have to recover, and you've got all your things that you're doing. So I'm building this block of time in. The nice part about doing that too, it gives the players a lot more time to do downtime stuff rather than just like a few hours. Who gets anything done in a few hours? He says, spending a few hours on stream writing. It also makes a campaign timeline make a lot more sense. It fills out a calendar if you keep one of those. I kind of do. Because if you go, go, go the way that the game allows you to, you could start on a Monday and they could be 20th level on the following Saturday fighting the big bad. Like, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not actually that much of an exaggeration. Like, you could be a few weeks in, maybe a month into a campaign, and amazing, unbelievable things have happened. So I'm a big fan of sort of verisimilitude and keeping the narrative coherent and interesting and exciting and reasonable. And so forcing in those blocks of time has helped with that. And that's obviously downtime in between sessions, but if you need to build in blocks other ways, I think that's possible too. You said earlier that when writing a story, we should consider the collaborative aspect of it all, but how much should we ideally have outlined for the story? I think the most important thing when a new campaign starts is that you have some kind of big concept that interests you, and it doesn't chart out the end game necessarily, but it's some big event that's happening that you'll enjoy mulling over and turning it around and looking at it from every different angle for a period of time. And every person, that's something different. Maybe it's some strange like time slippage conundrum, or maybe it's a political thing and like the king is corrupt and this war is not what it seems, or maybe it's an attack from the deep, from down below, monsters emerging from the ground and nobody knows why. Something like that should probably exist. You can have a lot of things like that, but probably some big threat out there on the horizon. And you want that to exist because then you go, okay, well, if that was happening, here's the regional impact of that. Like if monsters were emerging from the ground, well, probably every single region, every single city would start to like come up with a way to defend themselves, right? Trade roads, like travel, would become actually really arduous, and maybe the king might conscript and say, hey, basically, if you have magic, you have to come under service of the king because we need you to protect everybody from this horrible threat. And so now if you're doing magic, but you're not sort of sanctioned to do it, it's like, hey, wait, why don't you support the effort against these monsters? And you start to look suspicious. And you can bring that down, like you just keep kind of saying, if that was the case, what else would happen? What else would happen? What else would... Because the goal is you want that threat out there on the horizon, whatever it is. All that really matters, though, is that first session. And that first session, you're probably not going to be throwing them into the middle of the big threat. You're probably going to have them in their starting town, or in, on a ship, or, arriving to a new location, but it's going to be something small, and you're going to want that. You're going to want that crumb, that first crumb in a series of breadcrumbs that's going to lead you to that big crazy threat, whatever it happens to be. But that first session is all that matters. If you don't get that first session out, none of your ideas matter. If you don't get that first session to be fun and engaging and have not feel like you're holding stuff back, but feel like, wow, that's a really cool thing, and I wonder what's just around the corner now because that was so fun and interesting, right? Don't be afraid to use to use up some good ideas, I guess. To put it another way, everything out there in the world is probably an outline of ideas that are like they're solid, but they're they're foggy. They can change. Um, and obviously, and everything that's in the session is concrete, and not concrete's the wrong way to put it, but everything in the first session is designed for the players to engage with and have fun, and then you can continue to plan after that first session and respond to the aspects of the game that they latch onto. I think that's where the give and take happens, because if we take the idea of the magic is, you have to work for the king if you have magic, otherwise it's like you're looked at strangely. Well, let's say the party helps. There's some innocuous event. They break up a bar fight or they save some people on the road. And in doing so, somebody important, maybe from a distance, they don't get a clear look, but maybe somebody important sees that your group is using magic and they're not supposed to be, or at least like need to make sure you have a permit for that or whatever. But somebody else, an older mage, pulls the group aside and is like, come with me, hide if you're going to do that. There's intrigue. Now there's something interesting going on, and you've got two factions on two sides, and the party can legitimately side either way. Maybe they say, hey, we should be working with the king to solve this problem. Maybe they say, no, we'll help with it, but not under the thumb of the king. We're going to work more in secret. Depending on where they fall, then that's the part of the story you can develop and feed them more. It's at that point you're sort of like the game is back here on the treadmill and you're up here, and you just have to keep throwing more things at the front for them to kind of run through and hopefully find more. Is this ill-advised? Which part? Am I doing a poor job of selling it? If I'm not, if it doesn't seem like it, I mean, what I'm describing is basically how I go about making campaigns. I think it's like, it's the most fun way to do it to me, but I also approach the game as sort of sandboxy, right? Player directed. There are definitely interesting things in the world for them to investigate, but if they have some ideas, they want to go do XYZ, they can do that, right? So your story sort of revolves around a guy who stole a dragon and is causing chaos, havoc. And I was going to introduce him at the end of the first session. Is this ill-advised? I see. I don't think it has to be. I mean, keep in mind too, like when I'm trying to give all the caveats so that any of my advice and experience is sort of cut with how different I am potentially than others, potentially different than you. When I'm talking about this like expansive story and taking time to, like, my 2 campaigns that are running right now are like 4 to 5 years long, that's not every game. A campaign, depending on how, here's a way to do it. So I'm doing this with a one shot that I'm working on because it's sort of an investigation based one shot, and I took the story of, like, the background story, the discoverable story of the one shot, and I turned it into a series of declarative statements. So, there are 3 people missing in my one shot. Here are their names. Here's the nature of how the one person went missing. Here's what this other person has been doing. Here's evidence of the person's research into the other person's missing. Here's the weird creatures. Here's all. And I laid all of those out, and it's like each one of these things is something that a party can discover and learn for themselves based on following clues. You can kind of do that with a campaign story by saying, okay, somebody's doing something wild with a dragon. Maybe that's the first discovery. What are the next 5 to 10, right? And then you can sort of build towards that. So it really just depends. Depends on the nature of sort of the rest of the story, and also how long you want to spend expanding on that story. I think I don't think how I do it isn't like the most extreme example. I mean, there are people out there that have campaigns that are running for, a decade or more. That's super, super outlier stuff, though. That's not the common way people play the game. Still super cool, but it's almost a different beast. Like, I don't know exactly what crazy stuff is going on with the dragon, but if I had that reveal to work toward, I might want to start with the town, um the region that's being affected by the dragon, and then the party uncovers the dragon before they know about the guy. So it's like they think that they're about to fight a dragon, but a guy comes out and it's like, wait, hold on, you don't understand, right? So build them up to a moment where they think they understand what's going on. We're stopping this dragon from causing trouble, and then it's like, nope, actually, there's a guy. It's a pet or something. It's like, wait, what the heck is going on here? Like that can create a moment in the game of sort of questioning, realization, and a fun turn that can be unexpected, maybe. Spud, would I recommend one shots or long form campaigns? Do I have to choose? I think that the nice part about a one shot is it's low commitment. The hard part about a one shot is that it can be really hard to run a one shot in a single session if you've never run anything longer than that before. It probably would weigh out. It'd probably be like 51% or 6, like it's like 55% probably better to like start with one shots over campaigns because you're not going to get as overwhelmed. But I wish that there was something. It's been a while since I've given this spiel, but D&D needs we need the D&D equivalent of putt-putt. Because D&D right now is like golf, right? Golf is, I'm told, fun. People enjoy it. Some people have done it their whole lives, and it sounds a lot like D&D when you haven't played, right? Golf is also like impenetrable. If you just want to, like, I think I want to play golf today. It's like, okay, so there's a bunch of tools that you're going to need. You're going to need clubs, and you don't know the names of them. In D&D, you're going to need books. You don't know which ones or what they mean. You're going to need to have a place to go play. Like in D&D, it's like, wait, do I need miniatures? Do I need certainly table? Do I need people to play with? Who do I golf with? Well, I know some people who golf, but they like have like a whole group that they go golf with, and I don't know that they would want to bring me along. I've never tried it before. Like, is there space in their group? Do I find a brand new group? Where the hell do I go to find a brand new group? So D&D is like golf. Okay, so that's a similar problem. Well, what's the solution to that? Well, there may not be a solution totally for golf, but there does exist the concept of putt-putt. If you want to go to a place, it's all there for you. You're going to pay one fee, and you're going to take a putter. It's most accessible, and it's even going to be sort of fun for the whole family, right? There's going to be windmills, and there's going to be a clown's face, and there's going to be all these like trick shots you can try to do. And it's 9 or 18, only putting greens, and it's fun. And you can get a taste of it, and you go like, well, that was really fun. I could see myself really getting into that. Maybe I'll play more. Or you can say, that's all I need. I'm satisfied for a year now. I don't need to do this again. D&D, I don't think, has putt-putt yet. There are things here and there, especially in the board game world. Every once in a while, there's something that feels a little bit like that in the D&D space, but people understand board games. People understand that if they get at this box and it has a number of players on the side and it says 90 minutes, they have a good idea for what that playtime is going to be like. And as long as somebody read the rules before everybody sits down at 8 o'clock, we can have fun playing tonight. I think we're going to need to get to something like that for D&D if we're going to permeate that next, like if it's going to be easier for more people to learn how to play and to catch the bug, right? There's my spiel on putt-putt. Mountain Cat, you just became a DM for a new campaign. Do you have any suggestions? Well, first of all, you're already well on your way. I wasn't even aware. Like the books and things like that, like without opposable thumbs. I mean, the fact that as a cat you've made it as far as you have already, uh, that's fair. That's a fair response. Uh, I think that planning for sessions is a better use of time than world building and lore. That's world building and lore is definitely valuable, but only to the level that it impacts the table. If it makes it more fun at the table, otherwise it's sort of, you're writing a book. So for a new campaign, I would think about how to make as much of it playable at the table as possible. Um, sometimes that kind of other stuff can be a distraction. It might be helpful to think about how long you want the campaign to run for. There's nothing wrong with inserting time jumps at different points in order to hit the highlights of a campaign and allow it to be as fun as possible. A campaign doesn't have to go on for years. It can be 5 sessions and 50 sessions, 500 sessions. That would be kind of insane, but anywhere in between. Sometimes just thinking about that and sort of making an outline of what that could look like maybe can help you kind of frame out how much you want the game to, how long you want the game to last. And then I would say another, I'm trying to think of like advice that I don't normally share or think of. Obviously, the obvious stuff, like don't get too hung up on the rules. Nobody really knows the rules. Make a ruling and roll a dice to make a decision. Look it up later. Don't spend time in a session looking stuff up. And the other thing I would suggest is to really push to figure out what happens if things go wrong. So I call it preparing to fail. Let's say you have a boss fight. Here we go. I just had one of these. I was a player in one a couple nights ago. Let's say you have a boss fight, and the premise of the boss fight is that you guys have X many rounds to defeat this boss, or else the seal is broken and this horrible thing happens. And that may be, you're like, yeah, that's the challenge. Okay, let's see if they can win. One important question to think about when designing that sort of encounter is what happens if they don't? What happens if the party fails? Is this where this campaign dies? Is this where the party fails and we go to an epilogue and it's over? Or is there a failure state that can be just as much or more fun than it was before? Right. So a good example in this one shot that I'm working on here is that there is a monster staircase that's like really tough and guarding basically passage down to the cellar in this one shot that I'm writing right here on the screen that I've been working on. And the staircase is sort of designed for a low-level party to not be able to defeat it, and for this monster to basically incapacitate at least one member of the group and swallow them down into the hidden cellar so that they can see, oh, actually, this monster is like a doorway. It's like a secret door into this hidden area. However, let me see if I can scroll to it. You have to ask the question. I almost found it. What if the party actually defeats the staircase? This is me following my own advice. Let's prepare to fail. Let's say, okay, I set all this up in such a way that it's going to go this way, most likely, but sometimes maybe what if it actually goes this other way? It's a creative writing problem. It's just, okay, well, what could happen? Do we just say, oh no, sorry guys, you did the wrong thing and I guess it's over? No. Oh, okay, well, let's just artificially make it so that that's impossible. Oh yeah, yep, you guys have dealt 400 points of damage. I guess like it's still up. Like that's really unsatisfying. That's no fun. Well, what I came up with is that basically the staircase is foundational to the cottage and causes this big crack which um, which pours light down into this hidden area that interacts with this substance that basically starts teleporting the cottage all over the place. So yeah, you can do that, and if you do, they've basically made themselves a crazy sort of magic school bus to take them to these different locations, and things are basically kind of knocked off their axis. That seems really fun. That's a situation now where when the party faces this staircase monster, either they get swallowed up and or figure out sort of the puzzle that gets them down, or they are just like unbelievable badasses and they defeat the staircase, in which case that's almost even better because now this cool scene gets to happen and they uncover this new experience that wasn't originally planned. I think that some of the most exciting aspects of this game get unlocked if we just think about what if something bad happens, and not bad like, player goes down or something bad, but like what if the players really twist and break this? Or what if they do something that I'm not anticipating or that I think is impossible? If we think about a couple of those things, oftentimes it will bring us to an idea that might be even better than what we originally thought. And I think that process in campaign and session prep can be really valuable. Hope that helps. Mountain Cat. Jesse, longest morning stream. Can it be considered a morning stream when it just runs all day? No problem. No problem. Good luck with your campaign. Feel free to come by. We can chat about it anytime. You've run into a predicament. You're interested in world building again, but you suck at storytelling. Any advice if I also suck at making characters, ignoring your 7 original characters? I'm sure you don't. I'm sure you don't actually. Maybe instead of thinking about it as world building or storytelling, try to think of it as putting interesting decisions in front of the players. I think that while it's true that we sort of are building a world, and it's true that we hope that a story comes out of it, ultimately, and this I think is true even if you make it very sort of like the mechanics are laid bare. Ultimately, we're providing sort of decisions. If you take a campaign, you take D&D and you stack it up, all of the interesting moments are going to come from whatever decision that was put in front of the players and what they did with that decision. And sometimes that's even the answer to like, how do I deal with a weird, corner that I backed myself into in the campaign? It's like, well, what if you gave them a decision about that? And if they go the way that you hope they won't, what if you allowed that as well and embraced it and developed it? Sometimes that's where exciting stuff comes from. So yeah, just think about what would make for interesting challenges, either from a tactical perspective. How will they escape the tavern when it's on fire and there's people on the roof waiting to shoot them when they run out? Okay, that's a horrible situation. What are the players going to do? Maybe it's a character building or like a moral question of, two people are they've got 2 people that they could give business to like hire, basically passage out of town, but each of them have sort of they have views in the region that are at odds with each other, and now the players have to make a choice. Now the players, whichever one they go with, they're sort of ostensibly agreeing with that one in a way that like lots of people in the town will see. Like if they're forced to take a side, in other words, what side will they take? A good way to get at those ideas is to think about the types of stories that you like and sort of break them down, right? Even if it's from a brainstorming perspective, like maybe the ideas aren't flowing. Maybe there's not a whole bunch of stuff that inspires you right now. But if you make a list of Bomb Bomb Dia, hey, welcome to the stream. If you make a list of, say, hi Memo, make a list of like your 10 most favorite stories. They could be books, movies, television, and started to sort of break down the exciting moments within that, and then take that moment and say, okay, what are the building blocks of this moment? So when I'm thinking about that, gosh, what would I pick? So something like Back to the Future, right? Fundamental movie for me growing up, probably still now. And what are the exciting moments in that for me? Well, I really like the entire sort of fish out of water few minutes where Marty is in the past. I guess spoilers for Back to the Future if you've not seen a 30-year-old movie by now. And kind of thinks he's probably in the past, but isn't entirely sure, and is sort of like the last person who you would pick to be the world's first time traveler. I guess that's not Einie. And so him exploring his hometown, him exploring Hill Valley, that entire thing is just a wonderful storytelling beat. Like I think of that fondly from Back to the Future. Well, okay, we can't just put that scene into our games, right? It's like, well, yeah, okay. What if the party, through happenstance, or maybe a similar sort of, there's an alchemist, an inventor, maybe it's a weird brew of potions or a witch or something strange. What if it's almost like a mirror of their hometown? Or what if it's sort of like a dark, nightmarish version? What if they're sort of re-encountering something that's mundane and regular to them, but in a new way? And they have to sort of uncover what's different about the town. Why is it this way? That could be as simple as a room in a tavern. It could be an entire like guild hall, or maybe it's the whole town, or it could be the entire world. That's a way of like saying, well, what do I like about this? Okay, great. Now I'm going to take that and I'm going to reflect it into D&D and make something that could be playable and could launch other ideas off of. Well, now that I thought about that, what could twist the world? Does the material plane go crashing into the Feywild, and now it's how do we untangle everything? Or maybe it's darkness everywhere. Maybe it's everything is still, right? Like now I'm thinking of like Twilight Zone episodes where it's like if everything's frozen in time and everybody's like everything's half, that thing where it's like everybody's acting something out, but everybody's frozen, like they would do in an old Twilight Zone episode. Lots of ideas can stem from that, I think. Hey, Pokey. I'm actually I'm making this because it ties in with a one-shot that I've been working on that I plan to publish. So I'll be using this in playtesting and in like the, PDF and promo stuff that I put together for it. So it's this kind of like multi-storied, playable cottage. So I mostly do custom, but when I pull in inspiration from different universes, how do you do your own blending for stories? So yeah, I take inspiration from all sorts of stuff. I think that and I have a video about this somewhere, I think, where I use Lost as an example. I think the key is to really identify what the idea is and not the execution of that idea. So I think the example that I used in the short on this topic was like in Lost, kind of a slight spoiler, I guess, for the first season of Lost, but it's an acceptable one, I think, because it illustrates this really well. In the first season of Lost, there's a lot of talk about we have to get so-and-so, or we have to locate this. It's at the Black Rock. We have to go to the Black Rock. There are locals on the island that mention this Black Rock. And you don't know what the Black Rock is, but you have a bunch of pictures in your head of what that is. But almost nobody is imagining that when they get to the Black Rock, it is a ship that is somehow miraculously, crashed, like a huge like sailing vessel, like a pirate ship in the middle of the jungle, right? It's the Black Rock ship. So we could look at an idea like that and say, okay, well, how could we incorporate something like this into our games? And I think that, that first level idea is like, oh, okay, so we'll put a crashed thing somewhere that it doesn't belong. It's like, yeah, kind of. But to me, the interesting idea is there is a local term, like a protected, like a capital letter term that is meaningful to that local society, but completely meaningless to the party. And when they find out what it really is sort of, oh, there's sort of a revelation, right? Like that's actually the idea that's being used. The content fills in, the genre and the specifics and all of that. But if we were to steal that idea and not stealing the execution, we would focus on that. Like, okay, what is something in this, strange new land that the party is going to? What's an idea like that could be expressed, basically hiding in plain sight, so that only when the party, like something that, if you're on an island and they go, oh yeah, that's at the Black Rock, you're probably going to assume that it's literally a big black rock and that's why people call it that, right? So doing something similar in our campaigns, I think you could achieve the same effect. I don't really have an example of how to apply that one necessarily right now, but yeah, layers of ideas, right? The idea itself, if you get down to that like base level idea, it can express itself in a lot of different executions, I think. And so that in that way, there's almost no inspiration that's off, that's out of bounds, or that's that you can't make use of, even across genres, right? Because the actual idea, if you dig down far enough, is going to be something that can carry over. And that's how I can, take inspiration from Goosebumps or Twilight Zone or whatever else and plug it directly into my sort of 5e medieval flavored D&D game, and it's works just fine. Wayne, you said, what is the most amount of campaigns I've run at once? Some people run multiple, and it sounds a little crazy. It is, in the best way. For about 6 months, I ran 3 a week. That's not true. Sometimes it was 3 a week. I ran 2 a week, and 1 was every other week. And it was mostly to see if I could do it. So since the beginning with my campaigns, after I kind of got started and got my feet wet, once I started down the campaign road with like a group, I knew I wanted to do a custom world, a custom game and design everything. And I really like the process of sort of creating something and testing it out every week with a group and sort of seeing their feedback and adjusting. And I really enjoy that. So every single session that I run is unique, brand new. I've never run it before. There's something in it somewhere that I've never tried before. And initially I was just running 1 campaign a week, and then the opportunity came up to run a second one. And so I did that, and I noticed that as much as it felt like, oh no, this will be impossible to do, there were just more creative opportunities. There were just more ways to sort of, test and try and iterate on these ideas. And even some ideas that worked in one, I could take it and mix it and remix it and put it into the better context. I've never repeated sessions, but I'll use ideas back and forth. And that worked for a while. And then I had this like nagging thought where I was like, I wonder if that would happen again with a third. I wonder if I could keep getting these positive returns on this process by doing a third. And I also had, it was like a everything was different. It was like going to be like a 2-player game every other week. And I was like, let's use experience points. I've never run with those before. And it was going to be an urban game. Let's set it in this city. And it was a more episodic. It was kind of a fun, there were lots of things that were different about it. We ran that for a while. And it was fun. I liked it. Yeah, I have different groups. So now I only run 2 a week, barring scheduling conflicts, which seem to happen all the time sometimes. But that's that's everybody's game, I think, to some extent. Um, I think it's worth it to give it a shot if you enjoy the creative aspect of being a dungeon master. It's worth trying to see what your carrying capacity is or can be, and you can't know it unless you try. If it's at all interesting, I would encourage people to give it a shot, even if it's just, I'm going to run a couple of games this week, and maybe they don't have to be campaigns. You don't have to start up a commitment. Maybe I'm one of the weird ones that kind of finds that process invigorating. Because yeah, I don't really plan out very much. I have sort of vague ideas and an outline, but I plan a session, run a session each week, and that's just how I do it. Honestly, I think I probably was excited to get a second game going a week just to deal with those conflicts of scheduling. That way, if a game wasn't going to work out for some reason, I'd have a second game to fall back on. So I was always running something. It's a new idea, but I accidentally made my party go off plot. I was supposed to go fight a big bad, but instead I made them go to some random lord of a city not important, thinking it would help with the plot. Lol. I don't know what to do to get them back on track. So a lot of details I don't know. So let me just talk through this based on, like, I think I generally get what you're saying. So if I was in a situation where let's say that there's a big bad outside of the city threatening the city, and the party is supposed to go deal with that threat. And in learning about the threat, they sort of become aware and start interacting with the lord, one of the lords of the city, and maybe are distracted by sort of a side quest. Whatever that quest is, or whatever that interest level is they have with that lord of the city, you just have to relate it to that big bad. So is the lord perhaps in cahoots with the big bad, or maybe they are in opposition to the big bad? Maybe the lord of the city is pulling together. They're like, listen, this threat is growing, and I'm willing to put resources behind anybody who can go stop this big bad. And I think you guys can do it here. Let's meet tomorrow, and I could give you more details. In the meantime, if you could solve this one little problem for me, like, that would be a big help. There's somebody else that give us resources, sends them off on a quest. The party can do that small, short, one session quest. They come back the next day, and the big bad has like assassinated the lord. Like, the lord is missing or has been taken out in some strange series of events, and now they have an additional reason to hate the big bad. Like, there's just take whatever momentum you have going toward that character, or going toward this sort of side quest, and roll it up into the big bad somehow. Find a connection, either as it turns out the lord is evil and a part of the larger plot connected to the big bad, or the lord is against them. Like, figure out what the lord's perspective is on that big bad, and then make sure that gets weaved into whatever the party's doing there, right? Yeah, against them is helpful because it allows you to sort of, like, kind of talk about the large campaign concern through an NPC. It's not my favorite way to do it necessarily. Like, if there's a campaign level threat, I prefer to have 2 or 3 different NPCs, each one with a different perspective on it, right? So, like, if the campaign level threat is, there are maybe there's this orc tribe that's causing trouble for the whole region, and the king, has identified it as a problem, and this is something that's the party's gonna deal with a lot in the campaign. I don't really want to have necessarily one person from the king come and say, can you solve this problem for us? Here's what we want you to do. Here's how to go about solving it. I'd rather they interact with naturally somehow, right? In the first few kind of adventures they take on, Sure, there's probably somebody from the king who's like, listen, we got to wipe out this orc tribe. There's probably somebody else who says, I think we can probably negotiate with them. I think the orcs are after something and nobody's listening to one another. If we can actually, get into this particular cave, if we can actually sort of evade both sides and find this relic, and that's what the orcs are after, like we can probably negotiate peace. And then at some point there's an orc or whatever as well that's like, yeah, you need to see what the king has been up to and what he's done to these tribes, because there's some wrongs that need to be righted. Like if there are all these different forces, it's like, okay, now where does the party put themselves in this conflict? Are they siding with the orcs? Are they siding with the let's find peace here? Are they siding with actually the king has a good point, like this is terrible to like the eastern coast and we have to solve this? Like that's just one obviously very broad example, but depending on stuff like that, depending on what the party learns, I like to sort of kind of force them to find their perspective on it, like what is going to be the resolution to whatever that big problem is, and take out orcs and call it a dragon, take out a dragon, call it a plague, take that out and call it a series of strange incidents are happening and somebody has to investigate and find out who's responsible. Even a lich, even an evil wizard is doing all of these things. Well, sure, an evil wizard is doing all those things, but why, right? Sometimes it's fun to have just clear evil, somebody go stop them, but other times it can be interesting to say like, okay, well, what is the situation here? How complex is the conflict? And the more complex I think that it can be made, the more interesting the party has to sort of find a solution through it, and can often surprise, themselves or the DM. Sorry, a lot of that feels very vague, but that's generally how I think about that stuff. Hopefully some of that is helpful. Grammar Ash, do you have any specific ways you like to use to come up with plot points or story stuff? It's a good question. It's been a while since I've done a writing stream. I should find a way to do that more often. And like sometimes I'll prep sessions on stream. There's still some of those probably in the VODs tab or in like past lives that you can find. The preparing, or I should probably have a playlist I can link up, but Preparing to Fail is the name of the stream that I do when I'm like writing out and thinking about how to organize sessions. I don't like, generally speaking, brainstorming, but I do like the process that I describe in that video. So I'll use that sometimes. Otherwise, I try to kind of think big and go small, or start small and go big. Sometimes you have to go back and forth a couple different times. So for instance, recently I developed this little monastery town around the idea that there's a seer there, that there's somebody who can see the future, that actually was part of a traveling circus that the party saw like a year prior in the game world. And so it's like, okay, so there's a seer in a town, and that's what they're going to pass by. Well, what would be interesting? Well, I guess like, what if they're not coming to the town specifically, they're passing by it, but what if at one of the places they make camp, they brush aside like clean up a rock, and they see that there's actually a drawing of them with instructions, like somebody's been expecting them at this exact spot because there's a seer nearby and she knew that they would be there. And what else would they do? They'd probably put supplies there because they're about to be attacked by these undead and they need these special tools to evade them. All of that's true because the seer foresaw it, and so the party may want to track back to where that came from and actually interact and talk to this person who can apparently see the future. So it's like starting with an idea of I need for the town, and like, okay, here's like a cool idea that's there, but then how do I relate that to the party in a specific instance? Okay, the party gets there. Well, what are we going to do when we're there? Like, I like for there to be something weird about the town. So one idea was, when I give the players the map of the town, what if a bunch of buildings are crossed out? What if they explore and find out that all these seemingly fine homes are boarded up and nobody can, and they're marked with like evacuation dates and times, and like everybody's basically living on the north end of town. It's like, well, that's weird. They could ask about that, and they're like, I don't know, we do what the seer says, right? Like we trust her, and this is what she instructed us to do. This is what we do. So yeah, we had to leave our homes, and we now are all living in the castle over here or whatever. But then like a day or so later, the town is attacked by enemies of the party, and they're hit with like fire arrows from outside of town, and those are all the buildings that get hit, right? So like, in to some extent, like how I came to those ideas was just kind of looking at each thing and saying, okay, well, what would be interesting? It's like, well, that would be interesting. Okay, but how could I justify that being true? And then finding ways to try to tie everything together into hopefully an interesting couple of sessions as they explore a new town, um, and get some new quest hooks ultimately. Um, Grammar Ashley, you've been starting to write a fantasy novel to help develop the abilities of my characters. I've assigned them D&D classes and subclasses. It's been a cool way. Hey, that's neat. Yeah, that's a fun way to sort of develop things, I think. So fun. You fear that you get stuck in this loop of how do I then connect it to the main plot, even if I don't have to. So in my case, so yeah, that's push and pull for sure. When I say the party's not going to this monastery town with a seer in it, it's because they're going to the coast to investigate a lighthouse. So this is a distraction. It could be seen that way. However, it's going to be a pretty strong distraction because it's like somebody nearby knows that we're here. Can they see our future? What can we gain from them? I'm hoping it's a pretty big temptation. But yeah, they might blow it off. They might not be interested. They might keep going. Who knows? But if they do go and engage with the seer, well, the seer is like has like bandages wrapped around, and a lot of their acolytes have the same bandages wrapped around their face, around their eyes, because the monster at the lighthouse stole the seer's eyes. The seer can't currently see new things into the future. They're basically their powers were stuck or were stolen. So even if they take the distraction, the ultimate quest line is, if you guys will retrieve my eyes, I can see into your future again and help. So it's a roundabout way, but sometimes clues or like information that gets dropped at the end of a little arc, even if it seems unrelated. Like I said, with the idea of the cloak and the necklace being a clue that connects to the big bad, could be maybe you stumble onto an seemingly unrelated but tied plot line that sometimes I think it's okay for, sometimes our players are heroic just because they're in, the wrong place at the right time. Players engage more if you do a few sentences. I like doing voices too. I'm terrible I need to do a better job. I need to come up with a better system for remembering how the characters speak. Even if I write down notes, that's really not good enough. I need to probably start recording voice memos for myself of like, this is what this creature or this character sounds like. Even though I don't do a ton of voices or anything like that. I think that it can be fun, but can also sometimes distract me from probably the more important stuff. So my goal is never to discreetly plan more than a session at a time, because I used to plan multiple sessions out and then, best intentions meets players' creativity, and I would have to scrap ideas. And I was like, okay, well, that's a big waste of my time. If I spend all this time planning sessions that effectively get thrown out, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to waste that time. So I have very broad, vague ideas of what will come next, and I plan what I plan for the week of. So sometimes that means at the end of a session, I'm asking, what are the players intending to do the next session? Because that's what I have to prep. That took a while to get used to, but I like that. As painful as that can be, as stressful as that can be, for me, that became necessary for running the game the way that I want to run it. Making sure that I'm giving like maximum flexibility to the game and that I'm not, like I said, wasting my time planning things. That said, when I do sit down to plan, like I did earlier this week for all that seer monastery town stuff, broad ideas, right? Like, okay, there's going to be a painting of the party at a campsite. They're going to meet people in the town and the seer and get told about, the weird way that everybody lives there and get the quest line, and then the town is attacked, and then they're going to have to save the town or evacuate and then go off on the quest that they gave. I don't know how many sessions that is. These are just broad strokes. And then I just kind of narrow it down to, okay, well, for this next session, how do I make this fight at the campsite and them learning the stuff about, basically a chalk drawing of the party on a rock. How do I make that interesting? And that at this point doesn't take that long to do. But it's just like anything else. It just takes practice to run. I mean, if I'm honest, I could probably wing a session if I really needed to. I really like having time to plan and prep, but I do think it's sort of like a lot of disciplines where you can basically probably sink as much time as you allow yourself into it. And I think that that's okay if you have time. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the planning process, right? Now, if you don't enjoy the planning process, there's all sorts of tricks and hacks, I think, to probably use. Broad strokes and small details for me. Yeah, sort of. And it also keeps things loose, right? So if I need to adapt a plan as I go, or if I want to add something into it, it's easier to do that when I haven't sort of, fully typed up every single little thing. I would say early on, I would probably spend, like if I was going to run a session for a few hours, man, early on, I was probably like 1-to-1 game time to prep time. It's nowhere near that now. But I would say that even halftime, like if you're running like a 3 to 4 hour session and that takes you an hour to two to like prepare, I might try to think in terms of planning out an arc. That way you can spend a couple of hours broad strokes planning maybe a few sessions, and then it's easier for you to punch out the details as you move through that. That might be a way to approach it. Oh, sure. Yeah. Renee, I did a lot of the same thing. One of the funniest changes to how I prep is that I used to like make note cards for each of the characters that they might meet. And I would write down like phrases that they might say and like what's this character's disposition towards this in the world. I've definitely done that. And I think that that's a process you go through up to the point that you get more comfortable figuring out and analyzing after the fact, like, well, these are the notes that I use. Pay attention to the notes that you use and pay attention to the notes that you don't actually use. Sometimes that doesn't change how you prep. That just makes you aware that writing the notes is putting it in your head and now you don't have to reference them. You should still do that process, but you don't necessarily. For me, what that does is like I have some stuff that lives in my notes, but I have very specific things that I have at the table. And because I don't need all that, I've got most of that in my head, or I can dig it out and reference it if I need to. But usually I run a session from just like a single sheet of paper. That's all I need. I remember when I finally, so I was a DM for really a couple of years before I played as a player. So I'm very much DM for life type of thing. But when I played in a campaign, the thing I was happiest about the most, or my biggest takeaway was, man, there is a lot of ways for a player to have fun with this game. Like I kind of gave myself some leeway or some, I let myself off the hook a little bit as a DM, being like, oh, I need to always be providing all of these things. It's like, if you are an active player, if you're trying to have fun, there are so many ways to have fun. You have so much to do with your character and so many different things you can think about and ways, you can interrogate the world, ask questions, engage with it at your pace. Like, I think I probably would have assumed that anyway, but it was good to experience it and go like, okay, this is, it's not just, I mean, we are party planners to an extent. Like we can provide certainly more opportunities to have fun than not, but it's nice to know just how much players can control their fun. Hey, Gravital, how do you go about planning a large campaign? Okay. How do we go about planning a large campaign? Here's what I do. You need a big idea. This big idea can be just about anything. It needs to be simple to understand. It needs to have depth. It needs to be stuff that you can dig into, but probably most importantly, you need something that you want to spend a lot of time thinking about. This big idea is going to drive so much of the campaign, and you're going to be driving to it, away from it, through it for the whole campaign. So you want that to be strong. I don't think my big idea was very strong in the first kind of group campaign that I ran, mostly just because I didn't know any better. The second campaign that I ran, I was a lot more deliberate about this. And we're still getting to the big idea, but the version of the big idea that they have right now is that their guild was secretly being run by a lich. This lich made deals in this region, in this world, to sort of protect everybody through horrible means. That was sort of the big idea, was what if somebody made a horrible choice and is sort of the bad guy, but they're keeping back other bad guys. My miniseries, my Seafaring Island campaign that I'm working on, that's going to be just 6 to 10 episodes. I call it 6 to 10 sessions long. That big idea is really driven around, can the party be sort of taken to a place where they have a compelling moral choice to make at the end of just a handful of sessions. So some big idea that you care enough about that you want to keep. Okay, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Then you want to break this down. So let's just say, over here you have, like, this is the truest form of the threat. This is where you have, like I mentioned, like, this is where you have the lich. This is where you have the dragons. This is where you have the the rift opens to hell or something. This is the biggest. This is the big threat that's over everything. This is connected to the big idea. Maybe it is the big idea, but this is where that goes. But you can't really do anything with that. Like, you can eventually do something to that once you have 15th level amazing party, and they're like, let's go fight a lich. But at level 1, and as you're planning and everybody's getting started, even at level 3 or level 5, level 8, like, these are probably not things that you can actually tackle. So you take these big ideas and then you start to break them down. And that first sort of step down, I think, is, how does this, whatever this is, how has it affected the world? The game world that you have, big or small. Campaigns can take place. The world could be, I'm making a one shot that's the cottage. The world of this one shot is that cottage. The world could also be the entirety. But the point is, from end to end, whatever the boundary lines of your campaign world are, this big idea, this big threat has changed it. And it should have changed it in some way that, like, how is your world now different than it was before? How is it going to continue to change? And how does this make your world different than any other world that somebody could play in? And how the lich, how the dragons, how the rift opening to hell, it's gonna flavor a lot about your campaign. And then you go another level deeper. And this one is more of a regional question. How does it affect the region? Specifically the region, and I would say the region where the party is. This is now where it's getting more real. So we've got this overall threat, and it's changed the world, specifically in the party's neck of the woods. How is it affected? If we say that the dragons have made it so that the world, has made forces let's say, specifically to fend off these dragons because these attacks are happening more frequently. Well, maybe that means that in the region that the players are from, they've recently started recruiting at young ages, younger than maybe most people are comfortable with, and that's become a tension between sort of like the kingdom, the royal, the officials, whatever they are in your world, and basically the towns. And everybody's, maybe people are hiding, right? Because they don't want to be recruited to be trained and fighting off dragons. And from there, it's usually going to, I think, I'll break it down into in the region. These are factions. And to use this kind of dragon fighting recruitment idea, probably the guilds are going to react one way. Probably certain barons or mayors or however your world is structured, they're going to react another way. Each one of these groups is going to react to kind of this trickling down problem in a different way. And of course, the party's right in the thick of it. And then the faction's response to the regional problem, which is reflective of the big world problem, which is reflective of the big ideas. We've gotten really small here. Like I said, maybe it's a guild, officials, maybe it's the temples, the priests, and probably, cultists, right? How are people going to be taking advantage of the situation? How can people profit? What are the horrible things that would allow evil groups to get by? What would the maybe the the dark elves or the hobgoblins or the goblins or kobolds, or maybe there's a faction of giants, like how might all these groups respond to the regional changes? And then we are ready to actually look at the town, the starting town, wherever the party happens to be, whatever kicks things off for them. Given all of this, if to have thought through all of this down to here, which doesn't have to mean a lot. You can just make a little map like this and jot down ideas. By the time you get here, now the question is, okay, what is the smallest version of all of this that the party can feel, right? So what is the tiniest little impact that they can feel? If we talk about, maybe the guild is making money because there's certain guilds that are, the darker, less charming ones are actually selling people to the kingdom to fulfill the recruitment needs to go fight dragons, right? So for the party, maybe somebody that the party knows, or the bounty, or there's a big hubbub in town because somebody's gone missing. Maybe some people have been kidnapped, right? Or maybe somebody has run off to go find people that are being kidnapped, and that's caused drama. What you've got there now is like your first session, the first sort of inciting idea. It shouldn't be big and overblown. It should be really simple and easy to understand. Help the shopkeep's son or daughter or both have gone missing. Last we saw them, it was down by the river. Maybe they were swept away, but that wouldn't make any sense. They're great swimmers and they knew to come back, but also we found this, and it's some sort of like the sheath, like some sort of goblin little sheath. You can tell from the markings, and turns out that they're doing capturing for. So now we can stair step it back up. So then the party is going to solve this, and when the party solves this smallest version problem, it should really only take a session or two for them to find and save, let's say, these people who've gone missing, to solve whatever tiny little problem it is. Well, then in solving that, they might find out through the course of resolving that issue that, well, these goblins weren't working alone. It turns out these goblins were working for one of these factions. Factions probably aren't goblins. The factions probably are keeping their hands clean. And maybe it's going to take a little adventure or two for them to figure out exactly who that faction is. Well, why is that faction doing the things that it's doing? Well, they're making hard decisions and they're fighting with these other factions. Maybe the party has to choose who they're going to align with because they're all trying to deal with this larger issue of what's going on regionally. And then that expands into the world and back to ultimately, thanks to this stuff that they dealt with at the beginning, if the party wants to really solve any of these problems, they're ultimately going to find themselves dealing with this bigger threat. That's kind of an outline, I guess, or that's kind of an approach to building an outline, I think. Hey, T. Yeah, I've drawn something like this a few times. One of these times I'll get it perfect, but it's getting there. It's also really fun if you can manage to have the tiny version rhyme with the big version, but that's unnecessary. Yeah, I mean, you can grow and shrink this, and you can sort of create, you know, in a sense, like the goblins that you face in the first session are going to reflect somewhat onto who they work for. Well, who they work for might seem kind of like goblins compared to who they're working for. And you go up and you go up and you go up. Like those parallels could be fun to play with. Liking blueprints, how each clue the players find. Yes. You want to have the ability to drop lots of clues. And some of those clues might be for things way up here that the players don't have any context for yet. That's great. That gives them things to investigate and ask about. And ideally, the big idea, how do you deal with a lich? Maybe that's a little bit clearer. How do you deal with the threat of dragons? That gets a little bit, fuzzier. Certainly the rift opening to hell. For all of these types of big idea problems, you want the solutions that the world is grappling with to be fuzzy and gray enough that the party can actually make some, I think, interesting choices. Who would they align with? Are we eradicating dragons? Are we going to try to make peace with them? Or maybe we just need to get them to sleep for another 1,000 years and future generations can deal with it. This is a version of the method that I've been using. Now, granted, I've taken it all with a grain of salt. I've only done a couple of campaigns. But this is the way that I think about it in terms of how I would go about planning it. But keep in mind that first session is really all that counts. All of this other stuff can be really kind of broad and vague and unclear. Just focus on making that first session really fun. And then maybe a couple sessions after that. And by then you're off to the races. And then you can respond to what the party is interested in and excited in. And then you'll have a whole new set of questions to ask that are probably even harder to answer. Sivan, you're wanting to DM your first game and still looking where to start. Saw a little graph you made the other day, but still kind of stuck thinking about just buying a module to run. Any suggestions? So, I mean, for running a first game, are you thinking like a one shot or maybe more? What are the... So, I would recommend... what's it called? Wild Sheep Chase. Yeah, Winghorn Press, a Wild Sheep Chase. It's a very solid one shot. I've used it a bunch. You can also, there's a lot of room for playing around with it. Basic premise is your party gets approached by a talking sheep. Bah, help me. Seems to be magic, has a wand, runs off into the forest. Come on. I'd say that one's pretty good. I think it's Blue Alley. That's a review of it. Yes, I am human. Dungeon Master Guild said so. Blue Alley I've run. I don't think I've ever run all of it. Waterdeep's most infamous Death Trap. Kind of a funhouse dungeon, I thought. Kind of a little bit trickier because it's a big, crazy dungeon, and that could be really overwhelming, so your mileage may vary. Don't listen to Jesse, probably. What else? What else would I suggest running? I haven't done a lot of other people's, like I haven't run a whole lot of other people's stuff, which puts me at a slight disadvantage. I do want to take a look at some of these different modules at some point, just to be able to talk about them and like how I would approach them and run them. But Delian Tomb, which I think just became like the the not the starter adventure for Draw Steel, but maybe it's like the advanced adventure for Draw Steel. I think I was reading about that. This. This? Is it this one? God, hello, Matt. Um, okay, so your best bet for running the Delian Tomb is just finding Matt Colville's Your First Adventure Running the Game video on YouTube. It may take a couple of videos. I don't remember exactly, but I think the bulk of it he lays out here in like 12 minutes. Just Delian Tomb is literally just a clever idea that he, for lack of a better word, better phrase, shat this out in the course of a 12-minute. I think just like with a stream video recorded live, very little editing, just blah blah blah, typed it out. This is a super approachable, probably one of the best, most compact, like how to design a dungeon and make it work. Like it's just a simple 4 or 5 room approach. Yeah, they did expand it. That's true. That's fair. But honestly, like I've run variants of this probably 4 or 5 times. I say variants because you can very easily take what's here and just sort of slice and dice it up and change stuff and move it around. And this is a super approachable way to, I think, come up with something yourself. Again, just focused on that one session, but can have plenty of hints for future stuff too. You want to run a full campaign room, but I want to get the hang of DMing first before my food. Yeah, I totally get that. Yep, totally understand. And a good way to think about it, rather than running like you can think of it as a one shot. I actually think one shots, like they often get recommended as like a way to get started with D&D. Best case scenario, that's true, but unfortunately, sometimes that means that one shots can be some of the hardest things to run. So I'll see new DMs try to run a one shot and run out of time. And that's because managing time and adjusting for it during a session is maybe not an advanced dungeon master technique, but you need experience to know, like, I'm not going to get all this done. What do I do? So sometimes running a one shot I don't think is a great way to start. Maybe think in terms of an arc, like a story arc. Like, hey, I've got this idea. I think it's going to take 2 or 3 different times we play, kind of like if we were to play like a board game a couple times or something like that. That may be a way to think about it. So you're not running a campaign, but you're also not like perfectly executing a one shot that's going to get done in like 2.5 or 3.5 hours or whatever. Lost Mines is really popular. I've never played it. The stupidly, Ash and I picked it. I picked up the Essentials kit rather than Starters kit back when we started, 6 or whatever years ago. So ours was the it was set in Phandalin, but it's not the Lost Mines. It's Icespire Peak or something like that. The Dragon of Icespire Peak, I think. It's like weirdly set like before Lost Mines or after by like 20 years, I think. I don't know. I can't remember the history of all the history of Forgotten Realms geography and places is like leaked outside of my brain. I don't have it anymore. Icespire. It's true. I was able to like slice and dice it and make it work. I cut it up big time because Ashley played like 3 sessions of the Essentials thing, and then she's like, "Ooh, I want to go to Neverwinter," and it's like, okay, let's do that. Made it happen though. My thoughts on I think the words are sometimes unhelpful. Sometimes I feel like a railroad should be relabeled to like a roller coaster. You know, like railroading obviously has all the negative connotations, but a roller coaster's on tracks too, and you know when that hill's coming, and for some reason people still line up and enjoy a good enjoy a roller coaster. So that has never felt quite accurate, and I think railroads get a bad rap. I just think it's an incomplete conversation. And on the sandbox side, uh, like that's a lot closer to what I try to run, but I mean that's only kind of true because even a sandbox isn't a sandbox, like, or it is. Like the thing about a more open world is that it's faked, right? It's like when you look at these open world maps and it feels very big and expansive, but if you actually look at it, it's it's all that map's a couple miles across or whatever. Um, and people think they get excited like bigger is better and look at all these options, but if they're empty, if it's just country, if it's just like it's like when you look at a sometimes it feels like a sandbox is really just uh uh a roller coaster with a whole lot of different splits. You've got a lot of points of interest on a map, right? That's what that kind of stuff feels like. And I think that is a lot more interesting than kind of staying on a single track. But that doesn't mean that a single track can't be fun, and in some cases that is also sort of appropriate. Railroading is a roller coaster, a sandbox is a theme park. Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of like don't you feel like I feel like the implicit here's what is I think tricky about the conversation. I feel like implicit to the conversation is that well, a roller coaster or a railroad is easier for the dungeon master and therefore is bad for players. Whereas a sandbox or a theme park, if we want to use that analogy, is a lot more fun for players, but a whole lot harder for the dungeon master. And none of that's exactly true, but I feel like that's kind of the meta conversation that's happening, right? People aren't actually sitting there and going like, "Oh, this is the type of game I like. I prefer chocolate, not vanilla." Like they're not really talking about that. They're sort of disparaging a dungeon master for using a track system, a one-track system. Maybe that's just me reading into it, but that feels like that's kind of the implication when these conversations happen. Like, oh yeah, I was railroaded. It's like, oh, you mean somebody took time out of their life to try to craft an experience that you would enjoy and run a game for you? You spoiled brat. um, because the game can be totally fun and fine that way. Uh, and it also feels like I think for a lot of dungeon masters, wow, a sandbox is terrifying and difficult. And like I can't lay out a whole theme park. How can I make an entire world that people can go anywhere? And it's like, well, obviously don't do that, right? Don't do that. um uh you just need a handful of very loose thoughts that maybe could go somewhere and you lay them out in the world and then you the challenge the real challenge between the two setups is that for a single track adventure, I'm doing one of those right now. My party is doing like a mini series campaign. Ideally, it's or I have a new party, a new group that's doing it. Ideally, it's like 6 to 10 sessions, and then that's it. That's really weird for me. I normally do these big, long, expansive, multi-year projects. I think I would probably describe my miniseries as a railroad or as a roller coaster. I don't think that lessens the fun. If I'm going to contain it, well, I've got to take away some options. I've got to put them on the pirate ship and they're going to that damn island, right? They can't get on the ship and then it's like, okay, so you guys think we should sail east? Like I can't do that, right? I've got to propel it forward. And I think generally the sandbox games should probably be propelled forward, especially in the beginning, and then loosened up later on. So really, like, I guess I'm a fan of a roller coaster at the beginning of a campaign, no matter what. But even during those kind of on rails sections of the game, you can have fun choices. You can have interesting things. Every single one of my sessions that I'm designing, it's easier because I'm sort of boxing in the edges. But what that allows you to do is to say, oh, now I can really focus in on some of these things and say, okay, well, what are interesting decisions that they have to make that can still have ramifications? They can still have meaning. How do I make these choices matter within the confines of this? It's really just like a smaller sandbox, if you think about it. Am I mixing metaphors enough yet? Really, I think some of these words are helpful in expanding the vocabulary and talking about these things as less definitive descriptions of big long campaigns, and thinking more about like the minute to minute game design decisions, the hour to hour, session to session. What are the approaches to the campaign shape and structure that we're making that actually lend to more or less fun depending on the situation? Because I could certainly paint a story where a 6 to 10 session roller coaster on track on rails campaign is not fun. I could do the exact same thing with a sandbox. So it doesn't seem like these definitively help very much, and we just need to expand our language. I actually like the roller coaster in the theme park. I think that works. I was rambling there, so let me scroll up and make sure I got you. Karma, you're a big fan of Railroaders because you feel most DMs who prep oftentimes make games really fun, but it's difficult to sandbox for a lot of DMs. It's a lot of work. It's definitely going to be more work most of the time. Gibson with the sarcasm. Nonsense. Don't constrain me in a game with unlimited possibilities. True. Hey, Stevan. What's your best recommendation for keeping them on the tracks if they're going really far off? Sometimes you just have to gamify the game. You just have to expose the game a little bit. And I know this was something that it took me a little while to really embrace and really try to experiment with. I credit a couple of specific Matt Colville videos kind of pushed me over the edge and like, I need to try this technique a little bit more. So expose the game to the people playing the game. Sometimes I feel like and I think this is a good impulse, we want everything to sort of feel real, feel natural, feel like it is flowing the way that a narrative flows, the way that stories flow, all that kind of stuff. But if every once in a while we kind of step above the table or speak above the table and we kind of drop in objective markers, right? So you could say like, okay, here's the stuff on this quest board, and maybe they look at the stuff on the quest board and you say, by the way, that quest at the end of it, you'll have an option to recruit one of a couple of different NPCs that you meet along the way to basically join your guild. Or to use another example, like my current long-running campaign, like 4 or 5 year running campaign, is basically on rails for this final section of the game. They're kind of doing a run up to the finale, sort of. And rather than them racing to the castle and facing the big bad, who they currently are unable to reach anyway, like there's some plot coupons they need to be able to finally reach the big bad, but the big bad went ahead and captured loved ones from each of them, each of their families, starting towns, NPCs they care about, and has used minor villains to basically hide them away, kidnap them away somewhere in the world. Because the big bad is trying to ascend to godhood and needs this like month or 2 month long, who knows how long, he needs a bunch of time to do his ascension, and he wants to be left alone. So he basically taunts the party. He says, listen, I could take you guys out now, but you claim to be heroes, and so this is a test. right? And the whole world's going to know one way or the other. If you come at me now, you probably have the best chance of defeating me if you come chase after me. But all these loved ones, all these people that you claim to save are toast. Or you can go. I'm giving you all the information you need to go save them. You know, this one's in hell. This one's on an island. You know, these are trapped underneath this dwarven city. Go for it. But I guarantee you, by the time you save all of your friends, I'm going to be a god, and you're going to be facing one rather than facing me now. So he's sort of challenging their character. So when that situation came up, I basically laid it out for them. Again, this is sort of describing the terms of the on rails segment of really more than 10 sessions of game, like a whole bunch of the game. And when I laid it out, I said, if you guys go after the big bad right now, he will not be a god. If you guys save one of these 4 kidnapped NPCs, he's not going to be a god. If you save 2 of them out of the 4, he's not going to be a god. If you go for 3, he might be a god. And if you do all 4, he's definitely going to be a god by the time you reach him. Basically telling them that if they did 3 and then decided not to do the 4th, then we do a roll to find out. And so they get to sort of decide how to shape this last bit. But it's totally on rails. They're not sitting here going like, well, wait a minute. We have all these abilities. We're 15th level. Let's twist time. Let's stop time. Let's do portals. I said, guys, none of that's a thing. It doesn't even matter what the timeline is here. Mechanically speaking, this is what this is. The run up to fighting the big bad is all of these things, and this is the dynamic, and you guys can basically decide how much you want to do and how much you don't want to do. And then I think I even said, like, we'll honestly make the timeline make sense kind of post hoc once it all comes together, because it's just a lot easier that way. And I did that because I didn't want to give them a ticking clock, because honestly, they probably would have been able to beat it. If I said, like, if the big bad's like, okay, in 1 week I will be a god and all of these people are captured, the party could probably have all 4 of them saved in like 2.5 days, right? Because they could look and they could go, okay, they would do a timeline problem. They would do math, and they would go like, okay, we can do this thing and get the minimum amount of rest, and then we can jump through this portal here, and then we can do a rest there. They would be able to time crunch all of that in. That's not really what I wanted this to be. I wanted it to be comfortably on rails. Now those are 2 specific examples. I would say generically, how do you keep people on track? Multiple levels, right? The topmost one is there can be, and there should be, some pressure in the game world for them to continue forward. There can be, that's sort of the stick. You can use the carrot, right? There could be a benefit to moving forward in the path that you've laid out. And then I think at a certain point, especially if like this would be my approach, these 2 things, and then this last is my approach with my short mini-series campaign. If my party's going to run off the rails and say, no, we want to steal the pirate ship and we're going to go north rather than east, I would say, okay, pause, like above table, like the game I've created is over there. If you guys go up there, that's fine, but basically the campaign's over. You guys opt out, right? It's like flipping to the back of a choose your own adventure. It's like, I guess you don't want to read this type of book. That's okay. We can play something else. Let's figure something else out. I think at a certain point it's perfectly reasonable and should be expected, I think, for DMs to say, hey, that's fine. Maybe we don't want to play this sort of game right now. But anyway, hope that helps. And if they choose to go a different direction, now the town they're going to has the quest in it. The Quantum Ogre. Jesse, are you a prolific? Do you feed the Quantum Ogre? Are you the one keeping it alive? It's a tactic, but you notice I didn't suggest that one. It's fine. I understand it, but I don't recommend it. Personally, I don't use it. Say they're thinking of doing X X, Y, or Z next week. I'll work on X, Y, or Z so they have options. Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the benefits to not fully planning things out is to have the flexibility to be responsive to, you know, if one of my players reminds me, oh, yeah, they're trying to track down like a dragon's egg. Maybe I've forgotten about that for a few weeks. Let me make sure there's something in the next place that they go. That's, yeah, we should do that. That's different. When I'm, I guess to be fair to you, when I'm accusing you of the quantum ogring, to do that on like a full map scale would be like, okay, well, they're gonna face a horde of goblins if they go into the forest. And then the party's like, okay, well, we think we want to go down to the peaceful coastline and we want to, look at the caves there. And you go, sounds like they're going to find a horde of goblins down there. Like, that's, again, I understand it. I'm not going to necessarily attack it because, being a DM is hard and everybody has to grind through it and learn that way and learn other ways. I just think there are better ways to do it. There are better ways to solve that problem. So that'd be an interesting encounter. I haven't tried that one before. I did though take my first swing at a combat inspired by Alan Wake's American Nightmare, which is a bit of a throwback. I don't know if you guys remember. I don't know how many people here were around when I was playing that game a few months ago. But there's this neat sequence in American Nightmare where you're basically playing through the same area, but you have to like get everything correct to sort of unlock. So I had a combat that worked like that, where the players were basically experiencing the seer's vision or the seer's corrupted memory of an event. So it's like they were in like a room, like a dark room, holding hands with the seer, and the seer is projecting this into their minds. And each time they kind of played through the scenario, she's like, "No, I think somebody fell in the river." So then the players are like, okay. And one of them jumps in the river, and it's like, yeah, that's right. And then more evolves in the scene. It was fun. I definitely didn't do it perfectly, but I'm intrigued by that type of template for a for an encounter. It's using a combat encounter as a puzzle, which I feel like is a really fun thing to try and do. Shiny, you're thinking of restarting your D&D campaign. What are some simple fantasy plots? Yeah, here's a quick 6 simple fantasy plots that I think could be expanded on. The king made a deal to save his people, but he trusted the wrong person. Dragons have begun to attack, but they're really responding to some greater threat. Something is wrong with the planes, and they seem to be merging together, like the material with the Feywild, or maybe the Shadowfell into both. Be a fun like kaleidoscope thing. An apocalypse is predicted, but it can be delayed if a certain ritual is performed. Then the cleric receives a vision that they've been misled. The heir to the throne will die if the party can't return from the far reaches of the world with the means to save them, some MacGuffin. But the PCs aren't the only ones trying to save the heir. I almost imagine like it's a mad, 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 mad world type of thing. Race against other heroes and maybe some twists in the mix. By finding and combining the relics of a lost age, the party could ascend to be the true heroes they were prophesied to be. It's deserving of a twist, but there's something there too. Shiny, thanks so much. These are all great plots. Happy to help. It's a plot hook, right? It's an idea that maybe brings out other ideas. Keep in mind, my background is not coming from like, I don't come from like fantasy world, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that. I'm not inspired by the greats. I'm coming from this, choose your own adventure books and adventure stories and sci-fi and Twilight Zone. It's a tough one, Shiny. I haven't really run modules. I hear good things about the starter kit. I've taken a look at the new starter kit. So the old one was the Dragon. So I've only technically run the Essentials kit, which I think was the Dragon of Icespire Peak. And that was fine. I have heard good things about the starter kit, the old starter kit. I think a lot of people had success running that. I forget the name of it, though. And then there's the new one, which is some kind of dragon, has a dragon title as well. And I've briefly looked at that one, and it seems okay. So for new players, for a new DM, I might look at those boxes, look at those kits to get started. I do want to do a series at some point if I have time of kind of breaking down some of those and like how I would run them, maybe even some larger modules. I think could be fun to take a look at and see how they could be massaged and made easier to run, or at least just a different way to think about it. But I haven't made that series yet. We did end up starting the one shot. It's a campaign for sure now. One of my players said they would enjoy if I'd be more direct with the objective. Any way I can do that without directly telling them what to do? I don't think that you need to be. I think it's okay to lean into the game nature of the game, right? At least as an experiment, and especially when I think players are asking for it. Main objectives are tricky. And they may take time to get to, but let's say that let's look at it this way. Let's say that there are quests available from your perspective, right? You have 3 NPCs in the tavern, and from your perspective, each of them have basically given a plot hook to the party, but the party isn't seeing it or is not sure what to do, and they're like, "Can't you just tell us what we should do?" One way you could kind of help them out without being too direct is to say, almost have like an above table version of like, an NPC gives a plot hook of some sort. They want help defending or protecting or doing something out in the forest, let's say. And then you could say, by the way, if you guys help them, that's going to then provide you this benefit in town. Or if you go seek out this treasure with this other person, that in that treasure hoard is the sword of 1,000 wailing demons or something like that, right? Like you can almost give them it's a sort of quest marker or sort of like a promise. It doesn't have to be the end all be all, but it can be sort of a little bit of a temptation to help them kind of weigh things. Because what that sounds like to me, honestly, is that somebody who probably hasn't played kind of games of an open-ended nature like this, where you're all creating it kind of at the table, and maybe they're getting a little bit freaked out by having all the options, and so maybe some clarity like that could help them sort of take that step. Matt Colville, I don't remember the video, but he's definitely got some great advice around, like, I think he's literally before handed people like quest cards where it's like, if you go help them, like, you will get this sword. If you go do this, you will go, like, it's leaning again into the game rather than sort of the narrative, but I think it's okay, especially if what it does is help people embrace the narrative, right? If it helps them follow along, then that's probably at the end of the day worthwhile. Austin's got a good idea there too. Put urgency on certain things, give them option. I think my answer changes whether it's the main objective or whether it's side quests, because I think side quests can be a multitude, and my approach to those is to throw them out fairly liberally and let players grab what they're interested in, and otherwise, okay, that just didn't happen, right? Most of the side quests that I've ever drafted never come to be. So I wouldn't worry too much about those. I would just, nothing's caught their interest yet. If it's a main objective, that feels a little bit like an opportunity to revisit sort of session zero type of conversations to say, okay, well, what kind of game do we all want to play? And I know a pitfall that I fell into with my first really kind of big campaign with a group was aimlessness. And I can call it that now. At the time, I didn't think that. Because in my mind, I envisioned a sort of unfolding narrative that would become more compelling as the story developed. They'd learn about, this enemy in their first major arc, and then that enemy would develop and they'd want to go out. I imagined all of these things, but that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that that's what the players feel. That's just what I feel. That's just what's in my head. I know the narrative. I have sort of a cheat code on. But if you have that conversation, and this is what I try to do now when talking about a campaign, is I want to really align on like what is kind of the point. So for my Wednesday night game for years, that's been about the group told me, I said, what do you guys want your group to be about? And they said they wanted to build a guild. So that became the driving force of really the first 8 levels of that campaign is what's good for the guild. Now they were also unwittingly building an evil guild that they are now working to dismantle, but that gave direction and momentum. They chose it, they were interested, and then I built everything around that idea. For my recent sort of short campaign, right, that's based around basically a seafaring or like pirate adventure, well, that's fairly sort of says what it is on the tin, right? They're expecting, pirate ships and time at sea and treasure hunts, and like we talked about all of those ideas ahead of time. So the helpful thing about that is that when the narrative that I'm putting forth, sort of, especially for only 6 to 10 sessions, which is what this campaign is that I'm running right now, the narrative sort of requires them to want to be accepted as members of this pirate ship. But we've already had conversations about that's a thing that interests them in this campaign. And while that's cheating a little bit, man, you don't want to find yourself in a position where the players have to want to do something in order for the campaign to move forward, and they've never considered it or expressed that they wanted to before. So that's why I say, depending on if it's a side quest thing, I think there are lots of different ways to tackle it. If it's a main quest, main objective, like what type of heroes are we? What type of adventure is this? What's our momentum? What pushes us forward? That can, I think, be a productive meta conversation, right? Sometimes session zero, whatever you want to call it. Hi, Crane. You're writing these hooks, you know all the details your players don't. You have to keep reminding yourself that they don't know everything like you do. It's very true. Very true. Also, you always think of the office. Explain this to me like I'm 10. Explain it now like I'm 5. Well, and the cool part about quests is that they can start out simple and then develop and get crazy as you go, right? A really complex quest can almost deter parties from getting involved. Like an example that comes to mind is there was a up on a quest board early on in a group's campaign, there was just a request. We need people to protect us in the forest. We need to go bring down some trees, and it's a forest that will be fairly exposed, and the forest is dangerous. So we're looking to hire basically adventurers to keep lookout while we do our logging work. Super, super basic, straightforward. But what that ended up being was they stumbled into like a forest fire situation because there was a practicing student wizard that had unknowingly, accidentally conjured up some fire elementals, and they had to basically save the forest from burning down. The hook that gets them into that situation, it can develop and become something more crazy from there. Right, Crane? Hey, Shaza, you have a job board in town for bounties and whatnot, and pick NPCs, get prompts for quests. I guess you should go to taverns for quest progression. Definitely. Silly, it's the main objective. I'll definitely keep that in mind. I thought it would be fun to do a surprise story time. They just create their characters and I put them in the world, something simple. It can be. It can be. But then you're going to face, I feel a kinship, Silly. I've been in that spot. And when I looked back, because the one my Tuesday night game that I'm is slowly coming to a conclusion after many years of play. When I look back, what I actually wish I had done is been a bit more forward about what that main threat was, right? What is the thing? Is it because really like the players kind of develop their own, but what that also leaves room for is different players getting a different sense in their mind of what their character's motivation is. And moment of silence for like the most frustrating thing ever, players and their player characters wanting to like go in different directions to do accomplish different things. That's like it's resolvable, but it's just like such a grind once players get it in their heads that like, oh no, my number one objective for my character is that they protect our hometown and keep it safe. And then another one's like, well, mine is most important thing is to adventure and see the world. And you're like, that's one thing to talk about in session 0 or early on. That's another thing to be having that conversation 9 levels in. It's like, okay. So I think there's probably like, there's a hopeful spirit in me that thinks there's probably a way to square it. But at the same time, if you maybe to use my example of the side quest that develops into something wilder, maybe a main quest that starts very, very obviously, like this campaign is about preventing the giants from destroying this region and therefore everybody that the characters know. And it's about rallying support and figuring out how we're going to, is it building a wall? Do we need to work with the wizard coalition? Is it something we just need to proactively go attack and destroy every giant? If that's what it begins as, and it develops into something more almost like a second act to the main story campaign, maybe that's a good way to satisfy both. It's a tricky thing. They're fun problems to solve though. Yeah, it'll be interesting when I want to keep investigating this thing, because I think for homebrew campaigns this is like a big topic, right? Like how do we create compelling open world narrative stuff without making it feel more like a module, like a scripted on rails, blah blah blah. How do we make it feel spontaneous in some sense? And I think it's something that is going to take practice. It's one of the reasons that I'm excited to be doing these like shorter campaigns now, where I can sort of try some stuff out and then try something different out the next time. Hey Tails, that's a good question. How would I make a campaign interesting with only one player? So, you can give them a companion, right? You can give them and I think that's a good idea, giving them a partner that I think the right split is that it's a character you control outside of combat and it's a character they control inside of combat. So in combat, they have 2 characters to manage, gives them a lot more flexibility. It doesn't have to be constantly 1v1 type of combats, give them something to balance things out a little bit. And what I think is neat about a solo campaign is it gives you the chance to really scale everything down. You make it more personal. You can make it more kind of immediate in the immediate area. I think that you could have a compelling solo campaign or one-person campaign that maybe even doesn't leave the starting town, right? Or their hometown, or the hometown and the forest and the nearby hill with some strange tower on it. Like that could be a really rich, compelling location for a single adventurer, right? In some ways, it's a lot easier working with a single player campaign because you only really have to worry about the sensibilities of one player. So if that one player is intensely interested in lore, all they want to do is learn about dragons. That's what the campaign will at least largely consist of, right? You can sort of go all in on that idea without balancing that out for anybody else at the table. There's nobody else at the table. If it's an artificer who wants to tinker and get into some complex crafting mechanics, you can go all in on that. If it's someone who really enjoys the strategy even of the really kind of crunchy combat and complex scenarios like that, you can even get into that with them. So it's all about engaging directly with the player that you have, and you can do it without regarding balancing it for all the other players. And I think that's kind of a benefit. If you have the luxury of that type of situation, that can be really fun. In my experience, and this is just, I had to validate this. This is a Matt Colville statement from one of his videos about running solo play. I watched that video years ago, tried it out, found it to be also the case, which is that generally speaking, when players have a solo D&D experience, it's going to be like their favorite D&D that they've ever played, because it's such an intense level of improvisation and extemporaneous storytelling back and forth with one person. It ends up being like, it's intimate in a way. Like there's a lot of trust. It's like doing a scene. If you've ever been in theater or anything like that, it's like reading scenes together or working on characters together like that. You have to be really vulnerable. And so in a lot of ways, I think that can be exhilarating for people. It's hard to replicate those moments in a group setting. You can still do it, but I think that, in my experience, also means that solo players are it's easier to sort of stretch the bounds of what D&D can be. You can put them in more dream sequences. You can put them in more role-playing situations because they have room to figure all that out. They don't feel the pressure of everybody else at the table. So there's all these benefits, I think, to doing it. So yeah, I recommend everybody, give solo play a shot. I really like it. I know they always say don't split the party, but honestly, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that's fun, because now I get to have individual little sessions with the party and obviously get them back together post haste. But it's a fun trip. I kind of cut my teeth as a DM running a solo game for a year. So it's it's worth trying out, even if it is a bit terrifying compared to running a group. But that's okay. That's how we learn. Shout me on the channel tomorrow when I post. Awesome. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. Now would probably be a really good time to pull up a question. So I started a new channel in the Discord called Questions for Streams, and you guys have not disappointed. How do you successfully end a campaign? Like, after the big bad is defeated, how do you close it out? That's a really good question. Well, I think that you're on the right track already, just saying after the big bad is defeated, because I think this, I don't have any experience to suggest this, but if I had to guess, there are probably a lot of campaigns that, after the big bad is defeated, the fight, then it kind of sort of, it's like, okay, that was it, you guys. Yeah. And I feel like that would be really anticlimactic. So I've been thinking about this because I have a campaign that's been sort of slowly approaching this all year long. All year long, I've been like, okay, sometime this year it's gonna end, and now we're on like alternating weeks. So I'm like, all right, maybe sometime by the beginning of next year we'll. But it's headed that direction, and I think that I sort of view the run up to the villain anyway as sort of like a gauntlet run. There's going to be a little kind of mini arc of like, it's kind of like that if you kind of go by land to go fight Ganon in Breath of the Wild, it's like you got to go through the castle and you got to go through like the, you know, all the way up, uh, and you have all these phases and all of these things. Before any of that actually starts, like once the players know that that's what's coming, I would ask everybody, and I would probably meet with them, individually to do this, but basically I would ask everybody to put together thoughts for like a like a what their character does type of thing for like a not a prelude, what's the exact opposite, like a postscript on their character story, like before the fight, before they know if they're gonna actually survive it, before they know if they win the day. Let's assume that you do, and let's and go through all of those details. And then I think I would want to have sort of my own set of things that would happen that, there are the things that the players hope that they do to change the world, and there's things that I would want to have, like, yeah, epilogue, thanks, kind of structure. Like, I think having an epilogue section would be fun. I also think that it would be fun to, so like something that's really important to me is that the players have sort of like their catharsis after the battle happens, and then we would definitely meet again to talk about what happens to the world. And I think it would be really fun, like there's almost as like a reflection of the beginning of the campaign. How neat would it be that like one of the ways that they sort of continue on in the world, like I'm imagining some sort of kind of silly combat, or like maybe they're challenged by new heroes, or maybe they're like the testing grounds, like there's somebody, that they could do something to contribute to like another round of heroes, let's say, and they're seen as sort of seniors. They're sort of seen as leaders now in the world, and they establish their different locations, and then we drop all of their notes about what they do in the world, the ones that are, not insane. I'm certainly going to be willing to push back on like really wild stuff, but stuff that makes sense. We close out the characters, and then I would add a little bit more to it, and then I think I would want to do then somewhat of a narrative jump forward to kind of sink that in a little bit more. Like they're going to give a sense of where characters are going to end up, and then I'm going to point out that in some far-flung future when they are all gone, like there's this memoriam, like they're always recognized, maybe places got named after them, like their place, their status in the world is basically secure. I feel like that would be a really satisfying, like it doesn't say that everybody's dead, but it's like eventually everybody will be gone, and even then they're remembered and their place in history is set, and then you sort of fade out. I feel like that would be a really satisfying, like that's kind of in a nutshell what I have planned for my first campaign to really come to a close that way. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll report back, and then maybe next time I'll try something else. Yeah. And then I took over the northern continent after I destroyed the land bridge with the mountain range. It's like, okay, well all right, well, like I might adjust that into. And then the barbarian had some independent projects they wanted to pursue along the northern mountain range, and the stories of their successes were numerous and varied, and you all can choose to believe or disbelieve those. I mean, the barbarian more than anyone else, and that's what history knows. Yeah, got to start planting seeds. Hey, I get it. You definitely want it to be, like appropriate. And I think if there's a good idea and it makes sense, I'm not sure it will for my campaign. Actually, that's not true. There is one thing that my party's probably going to experience post game, but it's more of like a DLC. I might get to it before the end if I have time. But I don't think you should be afraid to do something as a send off, some kind of fun little excursion. I think there's a market for pre-painted encounters where you have a mini for each monster. I think that if you're willing to, I think absolutely. The question is, how do you sell it? How do you if that's something that you want to get into, it's like, yeah, I think so. I think there would be. I mean, look at all of the other pre-made stuff that people, look at tile companies and stuff like that, or dungeon tile companies and stuff like that. It's just a matter of building that over time. I'd say it's possible, yeah. I was thinking about this earlier too, where it's like this is still. I think that's why I put it in Discord when I announced the stream. This stuff is still kind of just like magic to me. Like it's easy to kind of forget what's going on, but it's like, wait, I put some like files on a thumb drive. I took it out to my garage, and then like I now have this stuff that's like plastic, and I've got to spend some time with it to get it like cleaned up and stuff like that. But this still just kind of blows me away. This is still just kind of like straight witchcraft that it works, and I can watch it. I've watched it so many times, like I get what's happening, and it makes a ton of sense. Like mechanically, it's all there. It all is sound, and I'm like, okay, yeah, somebody was really smart to come up with this. It actually is kind of, it's kind of simple in a way, and then what people can do with it is wild. But then my mind just kind of at different point in times, it's like, nah, it's magic. It's just magic that can be. The magic box makes things. Yeah, it's like my and my kids aren't quite old enough to really get excited about or appreciate this process yet. But it's like, I was psyched to have those like really fancy Play-Doh contraptions as a kid, and now it's like something from like Back to the Future or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, my dad has a printer. My dad has it prints things. My dad has one of those in the garage. It prints things out. Like, what do you mean things? Just whatever, just things. It can just make things. It's like, what? Should sound ridiculous. Definitely. Oh, I mean, believe me, I've always been nursing this idea for a stream that I just call it like, I don't have time for this, which is just forces me to do something that is not contributing to anything that I'm supposed to care about, like the actual opposite of, because I generally speaking am being creative in some way or form like on stream every day. But if it was like, okay, what if I categorically had to spend the next couple of hours doing something that I keep saying I don't have time to do? Like, going through my bins of miniatures and reorganizing and finding stuff that could be painted or turned into something. Or I need to repaint some of my player miniatures. Those have been in a sad state for a while. I don't have time for that. So, me and diegetic stream titles. So if you ever see it pop up, it says I don't have time for this, that I'm working on some weird stuff around the workshop that, I'll be glad when I do it, but it's really hard to take time for. So how do you make non-homebrew and / pre-made adventures fun for people who've done them before? Like, everyone now knows how Castle of Strahd goes, so how do you make it fresh for people? Well, I'm the right person to talk about this one because I've not played Curse of Strahd. No. Okay, so how do you make something for people that how do you make something fun if they've experienced it before? Or to use another example, like let's say it's a popular one shot. Let's say it's the Wild Sheep Chase or a Most Potent Brew, which we're talking about last stream. I think that there's enough to chew on as a player, and there's enough fun to be had at the table, that one thing to consider is that like I think a really good show or a really good demonstration that a player is like a veteran player is that they could handle that almost themselves. Like they could be like, "Oh, I've played that before. This will be great." Because at that point you have, assuming that they're interested in this sort of thing, you almost have like a second dungeon master at the table. You have somebody who kind of knows some stuff, and you're obviously probably going to run it differently than they've seen before. And maybe some things will be changed, but their opportunity is like maximizing fun, and maybe they'll focus more on role playing a character and being a part of a group rather than they will like be focused on like solving problems and being the hero all the time. So I think there is an opportunity there, but that requires somebody who's like a pretty mature player who's looking for an opportunity to like help other people have a lot of fun while getting a lot of satisfaction out of that experience. So I think that that's worth calling out. But in terms of like if that's not the case, or somebody's like, oh yeah, I've played that before, um, that could be an opportunity to, if you're playing something longer. I know I gave the one shot examples as I was thinking about like, okay, in that situation, somebody might just kind of play along and be a supportive player who maybe knows more, but they're not going to let that show. If you're playing something like Curse of Strahd, I would find a fun way to involve them in it. Obviously, this is to taste. Not every table is going to like this. Not every DM is going to like this. But say, okay, since you know it already, you're a plant, not like a. I mean, I guess they could be a living plant. It's not what I mean, though. They're a part of the party, but they're actually like an agent of Strahd. The reason they know the campaign is because they know the plan. They know the kind of stuff that's supposed to happen. And now they're there to basically make sure that everything works all the way up into a certain point. So not as like they're going to screw anything up. No, the plan is not to screw anything up. The plan is to gather information about the party, become their best friend, and when the time is perfect, which I haven't played Strahd, so I don't know what time that would be, spring the trap and, you know, give Strahd the upper hand, become Strahd's spy, exactly. To really like make that, to sell that as like a player thing and not just like some, frustrating mechanic that maybe they don't buy into, tell the player, at the end of the day, when that moment comes, it's entirely up to you whether you turn on the party or not. You could turn on Strahd. It's your choice in that moment. There's going to be a moment that I'm going to give you center stage. You're going to be called out. All of your lies are going to be shown, bared to the table. And then and then if you want, you can give the dramatic John McCain thumbs down vote if you want and turn things on Strahd and now have a complex relationship with your party if you want. But like I think that giving them some extra special involvement, I think, is a good way to do it. If it's a small enough game, if it is like a one shot or something like that, there's probably an opportunity to sort of twist some things and make it different enough that it's actually sometimes surprising how little it takes being different before people are kind of way thrown off of what to expect. And even for something as established as Strahd is, which, again, I don't really know it at all, but you could always say like, okay, well, we're going to start on like a different end of this continent or a different end of town or whatever. We're going to start from this other perspective, but that takes more work on the DM side. So sometimes the easiest one is just let that player be a spy or in cahoots. Let them have a cahoot. I think that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say. Did you guys ever see a short-lived one-season TV show called Flash Forward? Does that trigger any memories? This would have been like late 2000s, early 2010s. Somewhere in there, I think. Flash Forward was this really cool concept, and they and I don't remember all of the actors. I remember the one guy was Charlie from Lost is in it. Far Too Little. And the basic premise is that everybody on Earth basically passes out for like a couple minutes. It's like 3 minutes or something like that. And then when everybody wakes up, obviously that's like a worldwide like catastrophe, right? And so once they sort of tally and everybody gets things back, they start talking, and everybody sort of figures out that while they were passed out, everybody saw that like couple of minutes. They saw like a vision of themselves, and people sort of, there's enough information to determine that they saw like a year in the future, like 1 year from that moment, give or take. Everybody saw that time. Everybody had like it was like a worldwide flash forward event. And there's all this mystery, and there's all this stuff that happens, and people, things that, who knows about it, shadowy groups, and like, what does it mean? But the central theme of it, which is the much more interesting aspect, and why I wish that it had made it past a one season show, is that most of the stories consist of, well, does that mean it has to happen? Like, we've seen it. Does that mean that there's nothing we can do to stop it? Does that mean that we've been shown it so we can avoid it? What happens if we avoid it? Can it even be? Like, there's all of this like wonderful, and every character's reaction to what their future showed them tells you so much about them, and seeing all of them. Some people, they're like, you guys saw stuff? I saw nothing. So it's like, oh, I think that means those people will be dead in a year because they didn't see anything. And so then there's people grappling with that. Like, why is that the case, right? I feel like that would be an incredible premise for a certain type of campaign. Just to really grapple with, or like as like an interesting event. Like, it'd be fun to do as like a backdoor thing in a campaign. You remember reading a review at the time that said that this was good enough, you should watch it because it won't be canceled after just one season. Well. I was kind of surprised it didn't get more, because it kind of seemed like it was maybe there was like a exhaustion point for kind of like sci-fi stuff, because this was after Lost, this was after Heroes, and kind of all those shows that were a big smash. So oh yeah, sci-fi on Fox. But like, I feel like that would be interesting to introduce, kind of to surprise the party with, like, level 3 or 4 of a campaign. There is some sort of collective vision of the future that's seen, just to see what they want to do about it. Does that mean they're going to, like, some people in the show were like obsessively chasing down every detail of what they saw to understand it, to either make sure it came to be, to stop it, or whatever. Some people were just like, whatever, doesn't affect, I don't care. It'd be so interesting to see in a D&D context whether that would motivate or disinterest. And then, of course, you'd have the entire world, the fantasy world, reacting to that the same way, and like, what would that look like throughout the campaign? I just think that'd be really interesting. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but I think that'd be a fun wrinkle to throw in there. Yeah. You ask players to leave the table if they want to have a one-on-one with a single player. Yeah, I've done it. I would say that it's probably rare at this point that I do it, only because it depends on the group. So to me the fun part is if the party is going to sort of like, they want to know, and it's almost like the fun of doing that is for the player who stayed at the table, because everybody else is going to have fun sort of interrogating to try to find out what happened and hear the story and all that. So if you have a group that's into it, I think it can be fun. But I've also seen plenty of times groups just go like, okay, and they just sort of move on and nothing else comes of it. It's like, okay, well, if I think that there's a chance that it's not going to become like a fun thing for them, I'll just have everybody be at the table and see it, because at least then, more people have context of the interesting character stuff going on.
When is a game of D&D finished?
When you say it is the end.
Finished like in terms of sitting down for the session, or finished in terms of like the whole campaign. Like this is now close the book. It's
Like,
done.
yeah, like how do you end a game?
Mm.
Not a session.
Um.
Like,
Well,
With the words
what?
the end.
the end. Right. I would say that statistically, probably when it's abandoned, that's probably how most D and
Yeah.
D
Yeah.
actually wraps up. Is that eventually it's been 6 months, people just figure that they're never going to get to play that again.
My high school campaign, my DM wrote an epilogue that covered us getting to the big bad at the end,
Yeah,
fighting the boss in the epilogue, getting some cool loot,
right.
and then going our separate ways.
I think that ideally, I think an ending should certainly have uh should have that climax, whatever that, whether it's the big bad or some other thing like that, that should resolve. I like,
It should have a resolution to the conflict.
yeah, I like there to be then sort of like a falling action, there should. I wouldn't ever want to end there. I would want to end a session later, at least, with the players having some agency and sort of describing, if they're assuming that their characters make it, however many make it, kind of um, placing themselves in the world in some way, and then following that with kind of an additional sort of epilogue. And then honestly, like I would we would close that chapter, but I would always want to, like, does it ever really end? Because I would want their characters in some ways to weigh in on future events if need be, like not as a player, but like I feel like the dream. Maybe this is, I don't know if
Player cameos in the
or
future.
or just the idea of like, oh, somebody's so I've got a sorcerer character years down the line that's going to go to this like magic academy. I've got That's actually largely organized by this character that I ran for a decade ago, and I'm going to send them
Mm,
questions to see how they would see that going. Like I just feel like that would be a fun way to like let the world continue. And then they respond back, because I haven't talked to them in 8 years. They're
that
like, could you
is
just leave me alone? I don't
the
want to think
dream.
about D&D anymore. Um,
Oh, that's like a legacy TV show bringing back a cameo from a beloved character from the previous TV show.
yeah. So I mean that. So
Yeah,
it's kind of but like the plot should end, but the imagination doesn't have to ever, I think. And that's
yeah.
that. Yeah, that's what I would say.
So, but say you end the plot,
Yeah.
and then you have your denouement,
Hmm.
and your denouement is you like. I feel
Sorry,
like the
what word?
tendency would be to say
Did you say
you get your
denouement?
Denouement. It's
rewards.
like the send off, right?
Yeah, the denouement is after the climax. It's the
Is that
happily
French?
ever after scene.
It's Yiddish, actually. No, I don't know what I think it's. Yeah, I think it's French.
So you said, okay, you you beat the big bad, and what's the happily ever after? You have a scene,
Yeah.
aka the denouement, for where do you go? What do you see your characters get to do to enjoy
Hmm.
their freedom or whatever?
Hmm.
The tendency, I think, would be here's some new magic items.
Hmm.
Here's your new
Hmm.
stronghold. Here's your,
Hmm.
or whatever they call it in D&D. Uh, you know, you buy a house.
Yeah.
Now your character has a house.
Right.
Or you level up,
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, but now we want to use our new
Oh, sure.
gifts, right? And
Yeah.
then you've just kind of made it another cliffhanger,
Well, so
and it's
well,
not
so I
really
would
an
do
end.
two things, because I think it can. I think
Is it a cliffhanger or is it a hook?
the idea of leaving it open for future sort of like high five, we all got together again, let's play a one shot, bringing back our old characters, that could be cool. I think leaving the door open for that kind of stuff is neat. I would follow the trend of, like, I won't say to avoid spoilers, but some of my favorite shows of all time have done this, where I think a really satisfying ending, and my contribution to the epilogue of the story would be, yes, that's where all the characters, where they place themselves, they get a wizard's tower, they do whatever, they get a library, that's what they do. And then my plan, and none of my players are here, so they won't know this until it happens, is to say, and then eventually you all perish. And when you
I mean,
do,
that is statistically.
when you do, this is the impact on the land that you left, and I would carry it forward and show like the 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years, like what is the impact of what they did.
Show that they had a legacy.
That doesn't mean that we can't go
Mhm.
back, or that it's like, wait, you just, if that happens, then like we could never play one. It's like, hey, I didn't say how you died. Everybody probably dies at different times in different ways, and that story is, we may never tell. But I feel like that would make whatever goes on, like whatever you walk
It
away,
gives a really
it's
satisfying
the
closure without
whole
walking
thing
out
is
and being
shut. Like you would
disappointed.
never have to go back to that, unless it was just for like
Yeah.
a fun, a fun idea to use those characters in a different way. But I get what you're saying. Like it could be such a neat setup. But in my case, like I think the two campaigns that I'll see end with this similar type of closure to them are finishing at like 17th or 18th level, and it's like, that's probably good. Like I probably don't need, like, you could always, I guess, do, but that, depending on the type of one shot you're doing with 18th level fights, like, does everybody have 6 hours to spare? Because that's probably what it's going to take. And that could be fun too, but
Okay.
yeah, I guess it depends. It depends. So you feel like it would be a
I've never
cliffhanger?
played above 6th level.
Well, I just feel like you like it's hard to say, okay, we did our thing and it's done,
Mm-hmm.
because it's an ongoing story by default. You
Well,
have
yeah,
to
because
like,
happily ever after is a myth.
well, but we're telling myths. But you have to
Yeah.
decide when you want to put the happily ever after in.
Yeah, sure.
And
Mhm.
until you do, it's like, well, we can do one more session. It's an ongoing story.
Yep.
So, like, how would you decide? Yeah, it's time. Let's make new characters next time we meet, or whatever.
I
Besides
was
having new players.
Sure.
in college, we played almost exclusively one shots, but my favorite campaign I ever played was a 3-shot where the 6 of us all played siblings. And we had our 3 sessions and we had our conclusion at the end of that trilogy of sessions. And then 6 months later, we had a family reunion and we brought all the players back to just have another one shot, not in the same setting, but in a completely different setting with a different spoopy sort of thing um, happening. And that was a really fun way to like leave the story that we had
Mm-hmm.
complete and honor it, but then also have this fun little spin-off on the side.
So, I've never had a one shot last one session.
Ah,
Also, all of our sessions were 6 to 8 hours long, so
Well, that's one way to make it a one shot.
it's a good way to get a one campaign or a 2 or 3 shot campaign in.
Yep.
It's also a good way, depending on your players, to never do it again.
Could be.
We started at about 6 p.m. We'd take a break from like 8 to 8:30 for dinner, and then we'd finish at 2 a.m.
I mean, that sounds like a great time, to
It
be
was the
honest.
best
It also
time. College
it also
was
depends. Different groups have different levels of like social pausing they'll allow in a game, I've noticed.
Mm.
In a way that like sometimes I've seen and been a part of, sporadically tables enough to know that like some of these groups would drive me absolutely bonkers as a player or as a DM, where it's like, wait, you guys pause
Mhm.
to like have social conversations this often? Like this would drive me up the wall. It's sort of like that. It's sort of like when you're
Oh my
playing a
gosh,
board
yeah.
game and somebody is like always like not aware that it's their turn, and it's like he's just,
Mhm.
can you just, you're next, Could you get you to figure out your thing? But you don't, you can't say that. You look like a crazy person. You said that. Why do I draw things on dot grids? It's not like I used the proportions. Well, the trick with, yeah, I drew them. The trick with writer's block is I think the trick with any sort of thing that we do, I think that sometimes art and stuff that's viewed as like a creative outlet sometimes gets all jumbled up with this idea of feeling inspired. And feeling inspired is great. And it's one of the great bonuses, I think, to doing something that you love enough to be inspired about. But it's also a luxury. And I think it can really twist people's expectations of what it means to be creative. By that, I mean, people think, well, great artists, people who create stuff, they must be inspired all the time. I don't feel inspired, therefore I must not be a good artist or creative person. When really, like, those inspired moments are a luxury. They're amazing. They're awesome, and and sometimes we can get 10 times the amount of work done if we're feeling inspired. But also, if you're not feeling inspired, still got to work, still got to do the work, still got to do the job. So I think what can be really helpful is to try to find ways to generate ideas, to create something even when you don't feel like it, because generally speaking, that's going to be most of the time. One of my favorite approaches personally to this is an answer both to kind of that creative inspiration thing, as well as like writer's block. So I hate the typical brainstorming, the typical way that people do brainstorming. But that video that's going to come up in a second, hopefully, there's a short. I think it's less than a minute. It's actually a brainstorming tool. I've used it professionally. I've used it for D&D. It's really helpful for all sorts of. It's basically an idea generation exercise. And you can just do it with Post-its, you can do it with paper, and it just sort of gets you into a mindset of thinking, honestly, just kind of weirdly about things, reversing ideas, thinking about absurdities, and you end up with, in my experience, usually you always end up with a few ideas that you want to push further and use. And so I think finding things like that work for your methodology, finding things that works for your brain and what gets you going, I think is a necessity if you're going to, I guess, like, reliably create things. Or you can, kind of wait for the inspiration. And I think that could be okay too. I just think that we might be selling ourselves short on our abilities a little bit if we do that. Right? If we basically wait to be inspired to really sort of get to making stuff. And if it helps, Guitar Guy, like, so something that I want this channel and community to be, and here is a good time to mention community, drop the Discord link. My goal is for this channel, the Discord, to be a place where kind of that active group brainstorming can happen, where you don't have to kind of toil away on your own, but you can come and in stream here. We do a lot of it. If you have something in your campaign that you're toiling around with, you can throw it out in the chat. Usually I have time to dig into it with you. Yeah, and hopefully that helps, because this is a lot of what I'm trying to do here on the stream, and kind of showing what the process of doing all this stuff is like. My goal has been to basically create kind of what I was looking for when I was first getting started into being a dungeon master. Is I was looking around for not somebody. I was looking around for somebody cleaning up their crab, their silly little crab illustration on stream. No, I was looking for somebody like, I wanted to know what's it actually like. What's the day-to-day, making your campaign work, planning out the full thing. How do you deal with all of the unexpected stuff? Like, that's what I wanted to see. So hopefully people feel like they get that from the channel. Well, JJ, those are you're talking about the dark arts, and we're all very aware of them. You could call it railroading. I might prefer a term like a quantum ogre, right? If I put an ogre in the dungeon and I give players 6 different routes through that dungeon, but I know wherever they go, the quantum ogre is there and not there at the same time. I could conjure this ogre up anywhere. Yeah, it's the dark practices. We've all done them. It's no judgment. It's fine. But being aware of them and conscious of them, like what you're saying, just shows that, like, okay, so what could we do instead, right? You know, what might be a better approach? And there are better approaches. It's just, you know, some stuff's a lot of work, which is fair. I think it's an entirely unhelpful term. I get it. I understand why people use it, but it's time for us all to pick up some new vocab words. Luke, if your story only has one narrative path, that's fine. If it has 50, that's a lot of work. Give players too much choice, and they'll sit around with no idea what to do. Fair. 50 would probably always be too many, unless you have 50 cities on your map and whatever. But it all depends. Like, as long as the story is kept open-ended, like you have vague ideas, like, here's what I mean. So, arguably, I don't know how many cities are in my currently populated world, but let's just say there's like, what are there, like 10 or 12? So if I zoom in, my one campaign started here at Outpost 4. So I spent time figuring out what's at Outpost 4. At one point, they were traveling down to this hollow moor. It's like a swamp town that was besieged by, nearby in the swamp was a black dragon. I started to populate hollow moor. They decided it was too risky, too scary. They turned around. They went back to Outpost 4. I stopped populating and determining what was in hollow moor. They've been to Var Boldir, which is a mining town, dwarven community. I can tell you all sorts of stuff about that. They've been to Fitton, where it's got a child mayor, basically, or a teenage mayor that's a real jerk. I can tell you about that. They never went to Ridgemont. I don't know that much about Ridgemont. Never spent time figuring that out. They went to Fort Viridian. I can tell you all sorts of stuff about Fort Viridian. They haven't been to Refuge. Couldn't tell you a thing about Refuge. They've never been to Tyran. Don't know anything about Tyran. So, in a sense, like, you can build all of these options and give hooks and quests and all sorts of things, and then just wait to populate them until the party engages with them. Like, in that way, you take, like, the one story option that's fully fleshed out, you've got everything, and that's what you want to do, which, by the way, I think is probably totally fine most of the time. Or 50 different story options. Well, it doesn't matter as long as you're still prepping the one they choose. You could give them 150 story options, and then you start working on it once they make their decision. Yeah, JJ, I imagine. Hey, Soulkeeper, what'd you miss? We're just talking about campaign design, really. You just have to be careful not to quantum ogre yourself with those campaign hooks, right? Oh, yeah, I agree, Construct. Every time you get a chance to iterate on your own work is really, really powerful. You just have to be willing to, not be emotionally tied to what you did before. Yeah, you have to make sure when you're providing these, like, narrative campaign hooks that go different directions, call them quests, call them arcs, whatever you want to call them. You just want to make sure that they're distinct ideas that excite you and that you're not forcing it. So when you're sitting there and going, like, okay, well, what are the things that I might want to do? Like, it'd be really fun to do a treasure hunt. It'd be really fun to do a heist. It'd be really fun to do like some sort of Mad Max style, like, racing thing. Whatever those ideas are, you jot them all down, and then all that you have to do to prep that initially is decide what the hook is in the world that gives players access to that thing. Think about it like DLC. Like, you're planting all this stuff probably after their first adventure together, maybe 2 adventures in, when the world really begins to open up and they're looking at a map of the world, or maybe they're looking at a quest board, or maybe they're talking to NPCs, or they're getting letters because they're such amazing adventurers that, people are asking for heroes all around the region. Whatever opens it up as they start to look at those things, all that they're basically, it's like a menu. They get to sort of decide, like, well, that sounds interesting. That sounds interesting. And then once they start off in that direction, guys, that's what travel is for. Travel's going to take them at least a session. If they're going a long distance, it might take 2 sessions. And coming up with fun obstacles and encounters for travel in that direction is going to give you a couple of weeks to figure out what that town is like or what that adventure arc is like when they get there. And now all of a sudden you get to kind of let your party decide and see what they engage with. And when they read that quest, when they read that letter, they see that thing on the notice board and they lock in on, like you mentioned hobgoblins, and that's what they lock in on, and you're like, man, I don't even think they would care about that. But if that's what they're interested in, now you can prep the stuff that they seem excited about. And that's how you run all these options and make it seem like, makes it seem like you have infinite time to do all this prep, when in reality you're just sort of waiting till the last minute a little bit. Luke, you've almost never had it work for me that way. At the end of a session, everyone's tired and cranky. By next session, they've forgotten just about everything they plan to do. That can be tough. The only way that what I'm describing works is if, like, at the end of every session, I'm pretty stringent with my party that, like, you guys have to tell me, if you have options on the table, you have to tell me what you want to do next session. And I just tell them, because, like, that's what I'm going to prep. And if you guys don't tell me, I don't have that to prep. And that means that I'll probably still prep something, but it's not going to move the story forward the way it could if you'd made a decision. Like, I might think of some cool stuff that could happen, but if they go, wait, I thought we were going to, like, ride off into the swamp, it's like, okay, if that's what you guys are deciding, because you were picking north, south, east, west, I didn't know which way you were going, so we've got something happening here in town, and if that's your decision, that's what we'll do next session, right? So it's a way of, like, as dungeon masters, one of the few things we can fully control is the flow of time. And if the players are making decisions and they're motivated, you can say, okay, great, so you guys took a couple days of downtime, and then off we go to the thing that you said you want to do. But if you guys aren't sure what you want to do, you took a day of downtime, and then some crazy stuff happened in this small town that you're in, or in this encampment where you're staying, or in the hills where you have your current sort of long rest location. And then we'll see what happens there for a day. And then when you guys decide, okay, we'll jump the calendar forward a couple days and we'll go to the next spot. Guitar Guy, do any of my players watch the stream to get insight? They could. I honestly think they'd be pretty bored doing that, but yeah, obviously they could if they want to. I'd tell them not to, but Soul Keeper could be somebody from my game. I wouldn't know it. Yeah, Josh, the railroading. So it's interesting because I talked about it a bunch in the spring. I don't know if I've talked about it recently necessarily. And I want to spend. I could probably make a. It'd be fun to dig into it for like a really long, for like a longer video, like the history of the word and like how it's used and misused. Because I think primarily my problem with it is that it's a blocker to the real conversations that need to be had about game design and how we do game design. Railroad is used as this negative, it's this pejorative that people throw at dungeon masters, when in reality, like, and the clip that I'm talking about, I didn't quite get this far with it, but the reality is that people love roller coasters. And when you get on the roller coaster, you know where you're going to end up. You know that there are hills. You can't wait to take those hills, and you can't wait to go at high speeds and whip around and all the different stuff. Nothing wrong with that. Games are allowed to do that too. But obviously there are pros and cons, right? It's most of the time it feels like a little bit lesser of an experience than going on a safari where you don't know what you're going to get. But the idea that somebody who designs a roller coaster is somehow doing a bad job, it's just kind of silly. So I think I break down in a future clip. I'll be excited to find it, because I'm wondering how long it took me when thinking that through to start talking about it that way. But yeah, we need to bust through those. I actually don't have really a problem with the terms, because I get what people are saying, but to the extent that they stifle the interesting conversations, boy, yeah, I hate it. It's a slogan. It's just a slogan. It needs to be smacked down, and we need to replace it with some other words. I mean, my third campaign right now is an island campaign that I would classify as a railroaded adventure. It's only 10 sessions long, give or take. We'll see what it ends up being, but each session is taking it a step forward. There's some flexibility, right? Imagine a roller coaster with maybe a branching path or two that still loops back around and gets you to the part where you can get off at the end. But I think the challenge is building in interesting choices that still feel like they matter. They can interesting choices can exist within tracks, but basically, it's true. Yeah, like the colloquial how it's used in conversation within the hobby is. I mean, ultimately, what it means is that the dungeon master didn't let us do what we wanted to do, and we don't like him, so we're gonna call it railroading. It's just negative, and it's just whatever. It's probably, to be fair, it's probably not really people trying to like engage in conversation about like the design of their games and stuff like that. It's just people being frustrated. But yeah, it's all about limiting the creative problem solving. New Master, what are my thoughts on 2024 updates in general? Your group is still playing with 2014 at the moment, but seeing lots of mixed reviews. I say use whatever works for you. I'm still largely on 2014 myself, but that's just because I've got games that have been running for years and I'm not really interested in changing it up. So use what works, drop what doesn't. Honestly, I'm pretty live and let live when it comes to systems. I mean, the way that I'm structuring this one shot that I'm going to release is technically system agnostic. So I'm building out these rules, these mechanics for 5e 2014. I'll make another version for 2024 or is it 2025, whatever it is. I guess it's 2024, right? Yeah, 2024 rules. And then I'll translate it into Pathfinder, or translate it into Shadow Dark, like whatever people are using. That's what I want to support. I'm translating sort of my own personal method for handling stats into sort of the official 2014 way. Hey, New Master, thanks. Hello to you too. This is one of those 1-2s that I think I've already made the comment before that I don't think there are enough vulnerabilities in the monster manual. But if something is immune to necrotic, I feel like it has to be vulnerable to radiant. Like that just feels like, I feel like players expect that. I would. Like that feels like a one, and the reverse, right? If they're immune to radiant, then they should be vulnerable to necrotic. Like that just feels like the two sides of the coin. But yeah, exactly, Josh. Like rock, paper, scissors logic. Like, and that's good. Like we should want to lean into that because, like, frankly, I really like it when my players are thinking about that. My players are looking at kind of everything. They're observing what's going on and they're saying, wait, did it react to any specific elemental damage? It's like, that's awesome, because if they're paying attention to that, then you can start to have fun with that. Maybe they have a monster that shifts from one to the other. Maybe they have a monster that, depending on where it is in the room, that fluctuates. I'm thinking of the like the Twin Rova fight in Ocarina of Time, where you've got to like catch the fire from the one and throw it at the ice one and vice versa to do damage to the two witches. That fight could almost literally be translated into a D&D stat block. I'm sure somebody out there has. All right, so I think this description is probably problematic. So let me see if I can fix it. All right. So the vibe that I'm going for here is that the plant growth, if it's hit multiple times, the idea is that it's basically going to kind of divide into two parts, but it's going to share hit points. So it's not even like you've split HP. So if the growth is hit multiple times in one round, it must split in two. One half stays put, and the other tunnels to a new location up to 30 feet away. It must split in two. I don't think it has an action to split in two, does it? It doesn't. I think what I want to say is each time the growth splits, it loses half of its HP. I think that's all I want. Empress, do you guys know what stats are looked at the most on a character sheet? On like a player character sheet? No, I don't know that. All right, is that something that you do know, or are you just curious what people tend to prioritize? I think, yeah, the stats they're proficient in, saving throws when they're asked. Otherwise, people are probably looking down kind of their list of skills to see what they are strongest in. That'd be my guess. Oh, and what actions they have, what items and stuff, what they can use in combat, spells. Depends what they have on their sheet and how they organize their stuff, I guess. Empress, you're trying to organize character stats since the character sheets won't fit in the A5, and if I do Ultra, the words are all too small. Gotcha. I mean, I would almost recommend Empress like using a standard sheet at least for a couple of games and try to keep track of what you tend to reference and then just kind of emphasize that because probably everybody's different, right? So you never really know. Typical sessions 2 to 5-ish, just a set of sessions built to create unity, build a cause for uniting as a party. Oh, you're talking about like sessions 2 through 5, like early sessions, Swanosaur? I think at one point that's how I thought about it, but I think that now when I think about, like, I used to think that those early sessions were about sort of trying to drive that unity, or sort of find their purpose together. Now I think I sort of put that expectation on the party designing their characters and their group before the game even starts. I would much rather everybody go in knowing each other's characters. Not their characters don't know each other's characters, but above table, everybody knows the characters and they've sort of decided what unites them. I find that this takes a lot of the pressure off of me, and I think it makes a better final result anyway, because how many times have we guessed at like what's going to engage parties and just say, listen, you guys have two jobs. One is to come up with characters, ideally together, right? So everybody's like participating and feels collaborative from the very get-go with the characters, but also, why do you guys know each other? Now, that doesn't have to be they know each other beforehand, because to some extent, they're participating in how the game's going to go. They can sort of look ahead. They're like, well, like one of my groups, they said they wanted to run a guild together. They didn't start out running a guild together. That came together in those first handful of sessions, but they chose it, so they knew it was coming, so they could lean into it. I think that level of sort of meta play is totally fair. And it could be a simple thing, and it could be a weirder, a more complex thing. But the key is that if they're thinking about it, and they're sort of also helping to plan for it, they're going to care a lot more about it, and they're going to help it happen and not be sort of fighting and resisting. And you're also setting the expectation from the very beginning that this is what this game is. Now, everybody plays games differently. Some people want a little bit more antagonism between the party. I'm okay with a little bit of that because that's just natural that a team's going to fight within themselves, but I don't really like a... the game's not really great for PvP. It's just I don't want things to be in constant antagonism. I'd rather everybody sort of decide what's going to be the thing that unites them. And so that first session, those first few sessions are really more about either... My games are weird, I guess, because I don't necessarily... The reason that the group is together isn't the reason that they're going to be together in the long term. I'll just pull an example out. Let's say that they're like, well, we know each other because we're all friends and we're traveling across the country to go visit, we're traveling back home together and we just all know each other. That's how they start. But as a result of that, as a consequence of them just happening to be together in those first few sessions, there's going to be an adventure arc that begins to kick off and some deeper threads that they can pull on that actually gives them another deeper sense of forming as a team. Like, that's what they were doing together, but actually now they've found a deeper purpose through this seemingly random chance. Like, why were they were the only ones on the road when they heard the bell toll and people screaming and they went to go help, or they were the only ones with even some sort of weapon in the tavern and so they went to go run off and help. Whatever that situation is, yeah. So those first few sessions, it should be a really approachable, I think, easy adventure. But it's less about drawing them together and more about like, wow, this is crazy that we're all doing this type of adventure. And it gives them a chance to feel heroic. It gives them a chance to kind of earn that heroism reputation from their town, from the NPCs in the world. And for me, at least, it's a place to drop some initial story threads. They can start to say like, okay, well, the goblins they kept writing this god's name up on the wall of their cave. Why did they do that? Or, hey, we caught the kidnappers. One of them got away, but the other one, we picked his pocket, and it's got a list of like, this is like components for spells and people's names. This is weird. Like there's going to be something that sort of ties into a larger story that they can start investigating, because that's really what drives my game world for the most part, is sort of these threads and seeing what players want to pull on. Gibson, you like a bit of begrudging collaboration too? Yeah, like as long as there's some as long as it's playful, as long as there's playful antagonism, I think it's totally fine, right? It's only when it begins to be like a real issue that it's like, okay, guys, figure this out. And it doesn't have to be big, Swanosaur, and also you don't even have to necessarily know what it means yet. You just have to know that there's some clue. I think with one of my one of these actually came in a prologue at the very earliest stage of the game. I run prologues for my players, and one of them, she was a druid, and she was investigating this kind of shrine underground and fought a goblin. So that's a prologue story, right? She's level 1 fighting a single goblin, and amongst her investigation of this little kind of dungeon room that she couldn't proceed any further in, she found what I think I described as like strange sand that didn't belong there. And so she's like, can I collect it? She became a collector, and she still is in the campaign. She collects weird like dirts and sands and labels them and is trying to meticulously understand, which actually mattered because there were some folks from the desert who were sort of sabotaging those places that were bringing sort of foreign soil to different places just as a result of dragging it with them. So yeah, the threads to pull can start from the very, very, very beginning. Granted, that doesn't mean they're going to grab them, but if I mention that there's weird red-colored sand, and then in session 1 or 2 or 3, they're doing something and I mention it again, they all might not, but that one player is going to go, wait a minute, didn't I see some of that stuff in my earlier? And now they're imbuing, like, they're increasing the value of a little throwaway line that you could include in a scene. Yeah. Karen, I agree. I like I said, I'm not a big fan of I think like the player versus player stuff should be really rare and not something that becomes a focal point of anything. I have some patience for it, but yeah. Are you already knowing each other better and or easier to play? Are you talking about the players themselves? Probably, yeah. I don't think it matters whether the characters know each other as characters, the in-game characters. I don't think it matters. I think it can work either way, but my preferred way to do it is to start a new campaign first with character prologues. So before the first session where everybody's, level 2 or 3 or whatever, I have solo sessions with each of the players where their character basically gets a solo session focused on their character, focused on where they are in the world, how they sort of end up in that first session. And they get to meet NPCs that are specific to them. They get to sort of pull on their unique story thread that ties into everything. And I find that doing that gives everybody a really good sense in that first session who they are. It also allows me to sort of cheat, because if I spend, if I have 4 players and in each player's prologue, I introduce them to, Mr. NPC, and Mr. NPC is really nice to one of the players and is kind of a jerk to the other one and maybe cheated the other one out of something in their story. And, they each have these different relationships, and then they're in their one-shot, or not their one-shot, they're in their first session together, and Mr. NPC walks over to their table at the tavern. This could be an interesting thing, right? Like, everybody's got a different sense of who this person is, and not only can they, will they be saying different things to them when Mr. NPC walks away, there's an opportunity for them to be like, screw that guy, right? And it's like, wait, what are you talking about? He seemed nice to me. Like, I consider it sort of like a good, it's a way as a DM to cheat the early game, because we can basically, to some extent, preload some stuff into that first session, which is always the trickiest thing, right? Got everybody kind of awkward. They don't know what they're doing yet. But if you do the prologue first, they've already practiced their character's personality in game. They've met some characters. They know some names of things. They have something, hopefully, that they're trying to accomplish already in the game. That way, when they get thrown together, and usually in my games, there's some sort of an inciting event or action that kind of throws them all together in that first session. They may not even be thinking about the stuff that was planted in the prologue until the end of the first session or even the second session as they resolve whatever conflict is introduced. But as they do start to form, now they all have kind of something to talk about. They have a grounding in the world rather than starting from zero. So, and I've run it both ways, where the characters know each other before the game started, or if they're brand new when the game started. And I think it works either way. Hey, Traveling Knight. The writing is going well. Rewriting, actually. Kind of wrote up how I thought I wanted this first part to be explained, and just kind of rewrote it a bit, which I'm going to keep working on, I think, later. Now that I have stat blocks and I'm starting to flesh out. Also, hi, Traveling Knight. Welcome to the stream. Sorry. Too many things on my mind. But we're sitting at, north of 11,000 words now. So, hey, that's not bad. This is pre-edit, so a lot of that will go away. But that's a good question, Gibson. So for writing, one thing you're trying to do is introduce a new character. In a solo game, the goal is to have him appear at the end of the dungeon I'm in. How would you go about laying out a plot like that? So I would, if a character is being introduced, before the character shows up, I like to introduce evidence of their impact on the world. So if you're talking about a dungeon, then maybe as the party's moving through, they find supplies. They find a pack that was maybe ripped open and there's a label on it, or somewhere they find like some kind of scrap that has an identifier. Maybe there's something on like a leather tag or something that they find. Perhaps depending on the type of character that it is, maybe as they sneak up on some enemies, the two are grumbling about that, that stranger that almost, caught them or whatever. Maybe there are some whispers of some traits of the character that the party can sort of clock and be thinking about. And then really, like, depending on what the character is like, you can really go further with it. So for instance, let's say that it is I don't even know what would be a good example. Maybe, if it's kind of like in Portal, like the Rat Man type of character that they're going to run into, then maybe they kind of piece together that like they've been following the notes or the instructions. Maybe somebody's got chalk and they've been like, no, not this direction. They've been marking traps and signing everything with like RR, right? Like initials that they're signing. That way when they meet some guy named, Reginald, whatever, they're like, wait, what did you say your name was? They're like, we think we've been actually, was that your stuff? And he's like, what, it could just give them, and also especially if they are collecting that person's belongings, it gives them sort of a moral quandary at the point where they meet them. Every party or every person or whoever's playing is going to have like, do I give them their stuff? I like this stuff. This is good stuff. There was like a pouch of gold actually that they dropped back there that I think is theirs. Do I give that to them? And character can respond accordingly. So yeah, but you summed it up right. Breadcrumbs, basically. I would try to use breadcrumbs. Video games, they'll do actually a decent job of this. Trying to think if there's one that I played that, Control certainly had a bunch of hints at things before they got introduced, but it's not a great example of this. I guess Ratman, but you never meet the character. It's tricky because to some extent it's almost just like environmental storytelling for a character, right? Enshrouded has that too. Cool. I've played some. I don't know if horror, depends what you consider those, but I've played for Halloween this last year. I played a series of kind of spooky games like Little Nightmares and different things. Oh, there was one that was like a almost, what was it was like an emitter, like pinpoints, like dots of light that would like show when things moved. Like I've played a few things like that on stream before. I would say I generally like them. I'm not sure that. I know it's funny on stream because it always stresses folks out a little bit. I think it can be fun to be scared. It depends on the mood that I'm in, right? I'm not always in the mood to play a game like that, but when I am, I think it's fun. It's just like horror movies, you know. Sometimes I'm in the mood for it, sometimes I'm not. It's kind of like it's like the entertainment equivalent of spicy food. It's like inflicting pain on yourself for fun. But sometimes I like to use spicy stuff.